joint scheme.
Not good.
Okay, thanks for your time.
Set.
So I'm like
Good morning, everyone.
primary care.
I'm going to call the Board of Selectmen meeting to order, March 4th, 9:02 a.m. This is a joint meeting with Finance Committee. Peter?
Thank you all, and I'll call my board, Finance Committee to order. And at this time, I would request, Mr. Chairman, I have 4 members of the Finance Committee, Dana DaCosta, Mark Kelleher, Karen Doucette, and Angelo Lamontia, who, for legitimate reasons, will be calling in, and we would request a waiver, if you will, or exception to the policy you have on procedure for remote participation.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah.
Anyone on the Board of Selectmen have a problem with giving a waiver on our policy on remote participation for the Finance Committee today?
I thought we already granted that to the committee chair.
I don't know if that was passed, but, okay, so you don't have a problem with it. Larry?
I do not.
Okay, Julie?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Joe, you want to say that?
Thank you. Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, board members and committee members assembled, those folks that are here joining us, and everybody remote and eventually or now through Channel 18. Good morning. We are 58 days away from our grand pageant, which is the annual town meeting. And so I want to thank both public bodies and the other public body that may be joining us a little bit later this morning with the Water Wastewater Commissioners for taking their time on a lovely spring, almost spring morning with the rain outside. So without further ado, what I would suggest is that we just have a quick overview, or review, I should say, of the sources and uses that the town of Harwich plans on relying upon to fund the various items that will come before town meeting. With that, Mr. Chairman, through you, if I could, to recognize our Finance Director, Town Accountant.
Good morning, Anne Marie.
Having computer issues.
Okay.
And while you're getting set up, I might be able to share my screen.
That's what I was gonna ask.
Yep. All right, Jamie, here goes nothing.
Bow down.
I think if I stand over there, then I can hear me.
Here, you want to do it?
Yeah, I'm gonna need to borrow that so I can see. No.
I'll yield my time. Be careful, the camera's on.
And you add another seat right in between Don and you here, if we want.
Well, for now, why don't we have it just start, because I don't want to go over the
Okay, so what we've forecast for sources and uses is the tax levy limit of $57,513,450. Local receipts have been forecast for $15,782,472. The cherry sheet, which is our state aid funds that we receive from the state, $766,160. Overlay surplus is our usual $200,000. And the total transfer from other sources is $1,403,937. Then we deduct the cherry sheet charges. That's what the state takes back from us. That's $825,310. Over real estate, $450,000 for a total of $1,275,310. So the net available sources becomes $74,390,709. The town operating budget is projected for $30,090,941. Then we remove the semi-fixed costs, which is our Barnstable County retirement, debt service, health insurance, OPEB, property and liability insurance, and unemployment, for a total of $12,599,078. Cape Cod Tech High School has forecast a budget of $2,154,169. And Monomoy Regional School District has projected $28,352,229. This brings our total uses, what our expenditures are projected to be, to $74,471,727. So our net, what we still have available on the table, is $1,194,292.
Thank you, Emery. Peter, you want to open it up, questions for your board?
I'd just like to request that we get a copy of this.
It's being printed right now.
Okay, so we have it, we timestamp it, so as of today, that's the, that's the sheet we're working with. So, anyway, my board have questions? To me, it's straightforward, and I thank you, Anne Marie, for putting all this together. I know it's been a little bit of a juggling act, and this is so important to set the foundation for where we're going, with the budget season, so we're good, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Don?
I'm good.
All set? Julie? Larry?
I'm all set.
Thank you. I'm going to take a brief pause. Joe's gone to print these papers for us, and then we'll start calling on department heads. But I believe Joe wanted to make another statement. And Dan, you're ready to go? Okay. Ben and Mark are up. I don't know if you want to call on them as it comes, or have them raise their hand.
I can just recognize the fact that it's there.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I could, just while we're waiting, I see Dana DeCosta, you're online. Would you just verify that?
Yes, I am. I'm here.
Okay.
I
Mark
don't- I
Kelleher, are
don't
you
see your
online?
picture.
I am. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Yep. Who else do we have?
Okay, I'm here.
Karen, are you there?
I'm here as well, thank you.
Okay, how about Angela? You online? Not yet? Okay, so 3 of the 4 are online, just so we know.
So Jamie, that's caller 1.
Karen is caller 1, yeah.
Thank you.
Is he printing a giant document?
I think a lot of copies.
Angelo is unable to stand up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I guess it's taken a long time to mend, so he sent me an email, so he was gonna try and dial in remotely. He didn't sign.
Did he say what his condition was?
He fell down, a while back. And
Okay.
and he's done this a couple of times now, I think. And his legs aren't working.
Yeah, the reason I asked is because I think I'm dealing with spinal stenosis, which affects
Yeah,
the legs.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
Time for breakfast.
Thanks, everybody. Sorry for the delays, sorry for the little bit of hiccups here, but I'm a believer that we get them out of the way early. Chairman of the board has told me that our finance director has reviewed generally the sources and uses document. Once our copier wakes up, everybody will have hard copies of that this morning. But the reason why we had scheduled 30 minutes for this is I wanted to make sure that both Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee had ample time to dive into those numbers. And I can also share additional numbers as we go through this process. As you all know, the majority of what we deal with is operating budget. Then in second place is the Monomoy budget. And so what you're looking at now is one of the documents that all the participants have in your binders. It's what is meant to look like, we have a standard article, that's Article 4, which always tends to be Article 4, which is our operating budget. In years past, prior finance directors or administrators might have presented the bottom page slightly differently. In years past, we were aware of what was called the reconciliation, working with our current finance director and recognizing my obligations on the budget. I wanted to present it in the manner in which you see it in your binders. So it is the first set of documents, and I believe it's page 3. And if you look at the bottom, so you can see the number we're dealing with this morning for a total departmental budgets of $30,090,941, which represents a 3.3% increase year over year. So I will say it now and probably have to just remind a few times. When you're looking at that documentation, we are comparing 2024 BOS column, or the column on the far right, with the 2023 original budget column, or the second column in from the left from the department name. And so you have the departmental budgets, you have total debt, service, principal, and interest, and then you have the other fixed costs that we're aware of. Generally speaking, these are the ones we see every year. So we've got our retirement, unemployment, group health insurance, other post-employment benefits, general insurance, and general insurance deductible, which all of those lines total together shows a full cost of Article 4 operating budget of $42,690,019, or again, recognizing year over year, an increase of 1.21%. I can pause there if there are any questions for me or Anne Marie.
Questions, Don? Julie?
No.
Larry?
Joe, just maybe the percent change is the actual versus the department heads or your TA?
No, again, so you want to look at the 2023 original budget column. That's the comparison. That was the numbers that were presented at town meeting last year. And you want to compare that to the column that says 2024 BOS.
Okay,
And that's where the percentages tie back to.
okay, thank you.
Could I just ask for clarification on the column on the right, 2024 BOS, just to make sure the Board of Selectmen has voted that, is that right? Or is that,
That is, if I may, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Thank you. That is the budget that the board voted to send over to you in compliance with the charter. They have not yet voted Article 4 as an article.
Right.
Or the funding sources yet.
okay, no problem, just want to clarify
But I
that.
think it's a great question.
Okay, questions from my board? It's a lot to take in, and I know you've been digesting this in the last 24 hours, whatever, but, do you have any questions?
I'm good.
Dana?
Hello. I just asked about the, not listed as the state assessment and the Cape Cod Commission assessment. I'm sure they're up 2.5%, but I just wondered if they would be reflected somewhere.
You get the question?
Yep, I do. Thank you, Dana. From parts unknown, have you revealed where your location is?
From Florida.
It looks like an
Sunny
RV,
Florida
but I don't
or
want to say too much. So Dana, what I'm sharing now is the sources and uses document again.
Okay,
And the numbers that you're talking about are on line 11 under charges. So it reads as state cherry sheet charges, which includes
Yep.
Cape Cod Commission and the Barnstable County assessments.
okay,
So that's where that appears. And then the opposite actor, if you will, of that is what you see generally on line 4, the cherry sheet. So those are numbers that we get in from the state. And yes, I'll say it again, for me, as someone who washed ashore 8 years ago, it still blows my mind that a town that gets local aid, so-called, is in a deficit. Because when you grow up off Cape, there's no such thing. And so we can see that the money that we get in from Cherry Sheet is not sufficient to fully cover the Cherry Sheet charges. And I'll also add that the numbers that you see there for fiscal year '24 column, those are reflected in Governor Healy's House 1 numbers, which were released a week ago yesterday.
okay, thank you.
All right, Mark, did you have any questions? Hearing no response, we'll assume no.
Thank you, Peter. Go ahead, Joe.
And then the other thing I was talking about before, so this is my spreadsheet. These documents are generally still available, but I'm doing a tracking on raise and appropriate. So that's the spreadsheet you're looking at now on the screen. It is not in your packets because I consider it to be a working document. But you can see with the sources and uses number that the finance director mentioned, and that's where we get from the raise and appropriate for real estate and personal property. There's the number you'll see that we need for, let me jump over for a second if I could, Mr. Chairman. This is the table that I think you'll, excuse me. This is the table I think you folks will be most familiar with. So this is the table that typically appears in Article 4 that shows how we're financing Article 4. So you can see our other fund uses there that are betterments, cable fund, et cetera, 2.3 million. We're gonna draw upon the local receipts that were mentioned in the sources and uses deck. And so the delta between those two funding sources and the operating budget is how we determine what we're gonna take from raise and appropriate. So you can see that we're looking at 24.5 million from the taxes. So then I go back to my tally sheet. We've got the total amount of what we anticipate to raise and appropriate. We have the amount that needs to account for the operating budget and a running balance, if you will. We then deduct from that other charges, which are those fixed costs you've seen, as well as the two school systems. And so those are where the big things come into. So as of right now, we're dealing with a surplus, as you would have seen on the sources and uses document, of 1.19 million. Now, I say a surplus, and I say today, because that is obviously subject to change, because we will be having discussions about funding sources for other articles that seek appropriation. And one of the ones I want to put out there this morning on behalf of Select Board Member Kavanaugh, which is something that she's brought forward that the board endorses, is a mechanism for childcare support stipends in the community. Presently, we'd be looking to fund that and raise and appropriate, so that would be an item that would draw that dollar amount down. I will pause, I will sip, and I will take any questions if there are any.
Perfect. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, Joe, we went through the school presentation. What Julie was asking for is quite apart and very different from what the school was talking about, correct?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Okay, because this goes to the actual parent to use as,
Yeah, the way I
as they
would,
see fit for a preschool as opposed to going to hire staff at the school.
Yeah, not at all to do with the school.
Yeah, I just wanted to get that
yeah,
out there.
and what I would put out there is that this is meant to be, the the language I've used over the years in municipal government is this is a town-side project that the town of Harwich is endorsing for town of Harwich residents and parents, separate and distinct from anything the school systems would be doing. And I will put it out there in working with Select Board Member Kavanaugh on this over the last several months. I'm working off of a model I'm familiar with, which is what the town of Wellfleet did going back as far as 2013.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, because when we last left this room on Monday, they had an ask themselves in their budget, that I didn't want anybody to confuse with this.
Thank you.
Julie, any questions?
No, none.
Larry?
None.
Peter?
Just on the topic of the childcare, since, you know, we haven't been involved with it, are you talking about potentially either reimbursement or payment to individual parents for childcare? You're not talking about the town being in the childcare business?
No, not at all.
I'm just-
And through you, Mr.
Go
Chair, what it would be is that the payments would go, in other towns, they go directly to the provider.
Right.
So the parent doesn't even have to be involved. And the whole idea is to help defray the cost so that kids can go to preschool more than they're currently going, or not at all. Some of them are not going because of the cost. So in doing that, you're allowing the parents to work more. Children are getting educated from 3 up, which better enables them for school and hopefully removes some of the burden when they get to kindergarten and preschool. Some of them go to the preschool at the elementary. So just to help defray that startup too at that younger level. And so you figure to me, it's a trifecta. You're helping children, you're helping parents, and you're helping teachers eventually at the school level.
I don't understand. Thank you for that clarification. So I assume this would be an article that would be brought forward.
Correct, it's an appropriating article, there's already a draft
Yeah,
available.
and we'll look forward to seeing that. So then I'll get on with questions from my board. They're all shaking their heads while they're, oh, there you go, Dan.
Does the town maintain any special revenue funds?
Emery?
Sorry, that head gesture was, I will defer to the finance director, town
I
accountant.
saw that. That was good.
Yes, the town has revolving funds and special funds, state grants and federal grants.
State grants and federal grants. How much funding does the town get from federal funds?
I'll look that up for you.
You mean enduring as opposed to one time?
Ongoing, yeah. I'm just curious.
And that's gonna take a while to get back to us on that, so
Yeah,
we
it's
don't
not-
hold
not a
things up.
big-
Is that
I'm
okay?
just
Did you have
curious.
anything
That's
else on
fine.
that topic?
Nope.
Okay, will you get back to us with that, Anne Marie,
Yep.
later? Okay. Dana, any questions?
Oh, I'm good at this point.
All right, Karen,
I'm good, thank you.
Mark,
I'm okay.
Mark Kelleher, by the way. And Angela, you out there? He's not, so, okay, we're good. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Peter.
Thank you.
Joe?
And then last, because I've sort of kickstarted that discussion, the other item that administration is looking to recommend, raise, and appropriate is $25,000. It's a technology bill, separate and distinct from what our IT department's working on. It's support of library technology, which goes to the town's overall commitment to the library department under the Mass State Library Board's requirements. I know we have our library director on the schedule later, so that may come up as well. And that's a $25,000 ask.
Would that be an article as well?
Correct.
Okay, just checking.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I think we're
Questions
good.
from the Board of Selectmen?
No.
Go ahead.
That's all I have.
Excellent.
Right on schedule.
Yep, we're doing well. Dan, do you want to come up anyway, and you guys can call your meeting to order? We can wait the 4 minutes if you'd like, but we can add a member if another member shows up. You have 3 years set.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may, the method, the manner by which I was expecting to go through the process today is, as folks come up to the table, I would make you aware of certain data sources, as well as certain topics that are bound to come up. So an example of that would be, we're now progressing towards water and wastewater. You would have received in your packets the water and wastewater budget documents out of Munis. And so we'll be relying upon that for line item detail. And our water wastewater superintendent is diligently handing out some documentation that he shared with you folks last evening. But he's now giving you some hard copies. And for Mr. Chairman of Finance, if I could, to your members online, they want to refer to the superintendent's email of 4:14 PM last night to follow along.
Okay.
And then last but not least, if I could, what I would start with is, in some of the narratives that we have out there, there what is referenced as an enhancement of services for reclassification. And the superintendent and I have already talked, and we know that that is a item that the Board of Water Wastewater Commissioners has talked about. It now, that topic of reclassification should present itself next to the Board of Selectmen, but it is an executive session privileged topic, because reclassification is not an enhancement, it's a negotiating requirement under the collective bargaining agreements. So the Board of Selectmen cannot and should not be talking about the merits of the reclassifications or the funding. I would urge that we hold off on that discussion at a later date, because the Board of Selectmen, in this instance, under Chapter 150 of the Commonwealth, is the employer and would have an obligation to negotiate these reclassifications. So it's not a topic that is appropriate or germane come before the bodies this morning. Having said that, I think what we've been able to do, and I now look to the members of the Board of Wastewater Commissioners, the town's been put on notice that there's a desire to have these reclassifications. And then for me, it all dovetails into what Dan's probably gonna lead off with after the debt subsidy conversation, is the operational needs for water and wastewater as we progress towards becoming more of a water and sewer, AKA wastewater municipality. So operational employee issues are timely, but in the specific case of the reclassifications, not something that we can talk about this morning.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Gary?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. At this time, I'll open the meeting for the Water Commissioners. My name is Gary Crowe, Water Commissioner, Wastewater Commissioner, and the Chair of the Board. With me today is Judith, Alan, Sandy, Dan, and Noreen. And Dan, I'll leave it to you to take it away.
Thank you, Gary.
All right. I don't know if there's a particular format you want me to go through everything in.
However you please.
All right. If we can start with the handout that I just provided with the green table on it. I'd like to just summarize the FY23 anticipated wastewater debt, and then what we're anticipating for FY24. So in the column with the header fiscal year 23 wastewater debt budget, summarizes the items for wastewater that were anticipated to occur in the current fiscal year. The debt total amount that we had budgeted for was the 1.819, which was reflected in Appendix B as a transfer out of the general fund. Since that FY23 budgets were developed, you may recall we issued a change order for the Phase 2 wastewater project, which ultimately put that debt hitting the town out an extra fiscal year. So the column in the middle reflects the actual wastewater debt that we have incurred in fiscal year 23. So instead of the 1.819, we incurred a debt in the amount of $962,378. Looking at the rightmost column is FY24 wastewater debt as provided from Hilltop Securities, the town's bond counsel. I received this, I believe it was yesterday morning, that totalizes all of the debt that we anticipate paying for fiscal year 24, which...
Sorry, very quickly. Hilltop is our financial advisor. Lock Lord is our bond counsel.
Thank you. So my discussions with them, they provided an updated anticipated FY24 wastewater debt with a total of $1.312 million for next year. So what does that mean for the wastewater budget and the wastewater subsidy? So within the current fiscal year's budget, we are going to have a surplus, which is identified at the bottommost cell of the middle column, of $857,446. There's been a discussion internally about reappropriating that within the Maytown meeting to be used towards the debt subsidy for fiscal year 24. If we look to the bottom right column, the fiscal year 24 wastewater anticipated, that totalizes the expenses, salaries, debt, indirect costs and is the most up-to-date number I have, which reflects the 1.965689, which is the total departmental request for wastewater for fiscal year '24. It's a lot of numbers, so I don't know if we want to pause.
Yes.
And
Thank you.
If I could, Mr. Chairman. Based on what I said, if you look at that column that Dan was just referring to, the EOS salaries number, we would look for that number to be taken out. The town has always met its obligations after negotiation, and if we put a dollar amount certain in there, that goes back to the reclassifications, if I'm correct. That should not be part of the discussion going forward.
Which number was that?
So it's, if you're looking at the column that says fiscal year '24, WW anticipated, you see the bottom line of $1,965,689. If you go slightly up for a moment, second from the top, EOS salaries, $81,693. So that should be stricken from this budget. As the town goes through that process, we would have any number of funding sources we can rely upon. If we were to put it in now, it locks the town in without the benefit of negotiation.
Thank you, Joe. Peter, I'll start with you. Go ahead.
Could I add to that point before we get too far? Part of that number is a brand-new position for the wastewater department, and I understand that any upgrades or reclasses fall into the category related to negotiations, but traditionally, the town for brand-new positions has established a general range and put that out there for approval by the town before it gets refined to a salary amount, you know, when, if it's approved, if it actually happens.
Thank you. I was, here's the bad word of the day, assuming. So if the 81,693 includes the new position that's being contemplated so we would just be looking for that, the net amount that goes to the new position. You're absolutely right.
To be in the budget.
Correct. That should be in there. That is legitimate before us as a town and should be in there. The other numbers.
Do you have a breakdown?
yeah, that was, I put a placeholder of 80,000 for
For
the
the new
assistant, the
position.
new position. Easy math.
Michael, if I may,
Larry, go ahead.
question for Joel then. So to follow up your discussion, we keep for lack of a better term, a pot of money on the side for potential uses when we decide what the, when we negotiate contracts, is that correct?
Correct. The town has
That
always.
shows up in the budget, just.
Say again?
where's it- Does that's in this budget as a,
It's not in this budget, and if.
Go ahead.
Yep, so, as you may recall, sorry, Dan, I'm gonna go a little bit afield for a moment. So the town has 8 collective bargaining units. The town enjoys agreements, with 5 of them, with a 6-month, 6th one coming in potentially next week. So there's 2 outstanding. In anticipation of those negotiations, the board, administration, then the town endorsed the dollar amount that was in Article 4, line item 2, salary and wages, Board of Selectmen. That money was intended for these purposes. There's leftover, so we would be looking for an encumbrance or an appropriation to carry that over.
I just want to be sure that the budget, contains enough
And yes, thank
money
you.
to pay for
I will
that
tell you
would
folks that we're
roughly next
talking in
year.
75 million and 74 million. We have other funds beyond that. We have the means if the town endorses these adds to staff and any other actions that may be contemplated.
Thank you. Larry, you're all set?
Yeah.
Don? Good. Julie? Peter?
So I think I heard you say the new staff position would be $80,000.
That's what I've identified as a placeholder.
That's salary and wages?
Yeah.
What about benefits?
That is not
Not
benefits on
included,
top of that.
but you have that factored into your budget at the moment?
That would, I would have to go back to recalculate, because those would come out as indirect costs.
I understand.
So I don't have that figure.
No, I
present.
understand. I just request, I'll just make a statement on any new positions we're talking about, and I don't know what we're gonna be talking about. I would like to, I think the Finance Committee would appreciate and request that we see the salary, anticipated salary, I know they have to form the classifications and all that stuff, and then associated benefits go with it. So we know the true, the total cost to bring someone on board or whatever.
I have a multiplier that was provided to me.
Well,
in
that's
the
fine, you
past
get
for
back,
that, so I
you get back to us, not a problem, okay? Thank you. Now, my board on that column, if you will, or on this spreadsheet, having to do with with water, wastewater. Questions from those sitting here? Anybody? Bob?
Follow up on this conversation about EOS, so 80 of the 81,000 is the new position?
Correct.
Okay, and residual is all that was originally being discussed as being negotiated?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now I'll go to the folks out there in TV land. Dana?
We don't have the hand up from today, so I don't have that anyways, but I have no questions at this point.
Was that part of your email last night? And did the finance committee get that?
Yeah, I sent that email around last
Yeah,
night, quite
yeah.
frankly. Dan, quite frankly, I'll just be, make sure everybody knows, sent it to me, I don't know, 5, 6 o'clock last night, and I did distribute it to everybody on the finance team. So you may not, had a chance to look at it, whatnot, but you do have it. I would just say, if you hadn't had a chance to look at it, obviously, we're gonna take, you can ask questions later, or we can do it, next week, even when we do our budget and capital plan public hearings, so. You all
Sure.
set, Dana? Okay,
I'm good.
Karen?
I was just wondering, is this a time to vote new positions, and will they be, there's separate warrants and things like that?
No, we'll talk about that later. I think that's a separate
Okay.
discussion we'll get into later. Right now, we're just trying to understand
you.
numbers and, what the requirements
Yeah, I
might be.
understand.
The finance committee
Okay.
certainly will make a recommendation on how to deal with those at some, when we have our sessions next week. But I think now is not the time to hammer that out, quite frankly.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mark?
I'm all set.
Okay, good. So we're good.
Thank you. Okay. Go ahead, Dan.
I would just note that when we look at the FY '24 wastewater anticipated debt, if you see the 1.108 million, which is, I've identified as a general fund subsidy, that, in my opinion, is the number that should be in place at the top of the budget that's currently reflected at the 761,067. The 761,067, as I understand it, does not include the debt for the Phase 2 construction, which is identified in the middle of the green table with a total of 524,826 in principal, and Clean Water Trust fees in the amount of $26,217.
Thank you, Dan.
And then if we
You
can,
got anything on that?
No, but I just, if you're done with this sheet, I just want to make a comment, and that is, I know that this has been a bit of an exercise and a struggle to get these numbers right. And Anne Marie, I appreciate everything you've done to work with the water, wastewater folks to get this sorted out, because I think now, with my limited knowledge, it is sorted out, at least to the best of our availability. So now I think we have some solid numbers to work with going forward. So I just appreciate that and want to recognize that effort.
Thank you.
Yep.
Don?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to sound ignorant here, but just to recap, the 80,000 of the 81,000 is for the new position. So I fail to see how 1,000 and some odd dollars could cover the other part of it.
I can explain that.
Okay.
All right, so,
If I may, if we're talking about
You know,
dollar amounts related to reclassifications, this is not the proper form.
I get that, but in no event would that ever cover anything, just generally.
Yep, so you can't go through specifics, but if I understand the board member, can you give confidence that that is
yes.
a number that you think is valid?
And I can give a
Now,
number.
how you arrived at it is
An
another story.
explanation without specifics is salary and wages relative to that 1693 are predominantly held within the water department budget. Only a portion of those salaries are carried within the sewer operating budget, which is
Okay.
why the number's smaller.
So it's elsewhere.
Yeah. All right, so if we can look at the second handout that I provided, which is a summary of the FY '24 wastewater budget. I'll go through to highlight some of the bigger changes. Our indirect expenses, or identified as OFIS, which covers health insurance and benefits for the department staff, is risen 10.23. Those are fixed, semi-fixed costs. Salary and wages reflects contractual increases recently negotiated by the board. And then moving into the expense line item, the biggest change, you'll see the professional services line item. There's actually two professional services line items. One of those is a historic category that was created when the Sewer Enterprise Fund was developed, and that's where the funding was put for some of the early wastewater expenses. So one of those items definitely fall off the budget, but what you're seeing year over year is an increase in professional services from $381,160 to $398,678, which represents a 4.6% change year over year. And within those professional services are our IMA costs relative to the flow variable and fixed expenses to the town of Chatham. So that's the 4.6 year over year increase to our payment to Chatham. Beyond that, we have additional monies for printing and postage, which now that we have been in operation for a year, we have more realistic numbers, and we have sent quite a few letters and certified mailings. So we've increased that budget. Beyond that, the biggest decreases you see are with respect to the debt, principal, interest, and admin fees, and those reflect what we just discussed, which was the difference between anticipated FY23 and anticipated actuals for FY24.
Thank you, Dan. Joe?
Well, first, what I'd like to do is share a screen for a moment. And again, as I was telling you before, this is a table that appears traditionally in the article, and it's how we break down the costs that were just discussed. And I'm trying to break down the sources that we would do to pay for that. So if you can see on the screen there, so Dan, I need you to check my math, but the salaries line now at 173,882 is the 993,882 plus the 80,000. So we're gonna put that in because it's being contemplated. Expenses, debt, and indirect costs I took from your spreadsheet. So then the new bottom line number is 1,963,996.
If I may,
Yeah.
there was one, no, you're good, never mind, sorry.
All right, so then, what I have suggested is the general fund number that you see in the 11 by 17 spreadsheet that Dan just went over. That's where we would enjoy the reduction of that 1,693 so-called, and then we have the reappropriate. First, you have $2,777, excuse me, $277,550 in retained earnings. Have we used retained earnings before to offset? And is there any recommendation to use retained earnings going forward to offset?
We did last year use, I believe it was 200,000 of retained earnings towards the wastewater operating budget.
Dan's absolutely correct. Last year, we started with 452,000 on the recommendation of the finance director. We contributed 200,000, and the town paid 357,000. So that made up our operational deficit subsidy last year, not including any debt. This year, we start off with only 252,000. It's over my pay grade to estimate what our retained earnings, might be at end of year. No, we haven't used any, and since we're a new department with new things, we don't anticipate huge things breaking or needs by that, but at my level, I don't think we should touch that 252 at this point, because there's so many numbers moving around. It makes me leery, but I certainly would defer to anybody with a higher grade level of finance.
Thank you, Noreen. Dan?
I mean, for me, I just think that we need to ensure that there's a sum of money in there to cover an emergency should there happen. I wouldn't recommend depleting it in its entirety.
Joe?
I put it out there for discussion purposes. I think these are the right bodies to have this discussion. We show on the table that we can account for it. Question is, any other sources that can come to bear ease the burden on raise and appropriate? That's why I asked the question. but I think it's a policy question for Board of Water Wastewater Commissioners, Board of Selectmen, and Finance Committee.
Thank you, Joe. Don?
I'm sort of siding with Dan here, is that you don't necessarily want to encumber the whole amount, because you could seek, I mean, if there was a real emergency, you could always seek money. Am I incorrect there?
No, I believe you're correct.
Yeah, so, I mean, rather than encumbering an amount that's beyond what you reasonably want to use, we could always, they could go to the Finance Committee.
Go ahead, Noreen?
We don't encumber retained earnings. That calculation, that amount of money will disappear June 30th, just like your free cash will disappear. What I'm saying is that I'm not at the grade level where I can tell you what our new what our new retained earnings amount will be. You know, if I thought it was gonna be $1 million, I'd say, you know, take 200,000 of what we have that's before it disappears June 30th, but with the numbers moving around, and it would have to be somebody at a higher grade level.
Dan?
What I would say as, what I've understood from some of the classes I've taken with respect to enterprise funds, what they've recommended is a minimum of 25% of your budget, your operation budget, should be reserved within retained earnings. So if we remove the debt from the sewer operating budget, we are in the neighborhood of $600,000 for fiscal year '24. So if we retained at minimum $150,000 within retained earnings, we would be meeting that kind of standard, if you will, of 25%.
Thank you, Dan. Julie?
I don't have any questions.
Larry?
That makes sense to me.
No, good discussion, I agree.
Joe?
Intended to be a point of clarification, and I'll look to the Finance Director, Town Accountant to extricate me if needed. The town is aware of the retained earnings for wastewater. It is $277,550, and it can be brought to bear in fiscal year '24, correct?
It's sitting in '23 right now, and they can use it for '24 if they want.
So we do know the number for free cash. And then after this, the reason why I had the sidebar with the Board of Selectmen chair is, once we've gone through this, I do want to make sure I capture an earlier statement you said in the operating budget, so as we go through today, I want to make sure I'm capturing all of the statements that are made to have an updated document, so I can make sure my numbers continue to tie back. So we see the numbers on the screen. Those numbers include the debt but exclude the retained earnings. And then I turn it back over to Finance Committee, but the number that's available is $277,550 as certified by the Department of Revenue.
Yeah, we get it.
Thank you. Peter?
Dan, on the budget sheet you have here, the spreadsheet, again, for the enhancement of services, you had the $81,000, which I understand includes the new position. Where do you account for the benefits?
The benefits are captured within indirect, but I would need to recalculate the indirect expense line item to add in for the new position.
Okay, all right. And just to help us out, and I think everybody, how many houses or, properties are connected to the sewer collection system at the moment?
Yeah, I would say we're between 80 and 100 now. Last time I checked, it was a hard 85, but I know there's been a handful that have gone in since.
And what do you think it'll be a year from now, for instance? I mean, do you see them coming on like 20
Yeah,
a month?
they're coming on hot and heavy. They are. And, more and more people are looking and wanting. We also, and what I wanted to note today publicly was that the new Cape Cod Aqua Fund through the Barnstable County is now available, which is the zero and low interest loans. So I'm hoping that anyone who is waiting for that opportunity due to financial circumstances can now take action and get online as well. I would say this time next year we should have 160 to 200 online.
And what kind of flow would that represent, based on what our limits are with Chatham?
I don't think that we are going to hit our third milestone payment probably for some time. I think the next one is at 150,000 gallons per day.
Yeah.
I'm pulling from memory here.
I think you're right, yeah.
We're a ways out.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
A long ways out.
I would say.
Yeah. So questions from my board sitting at the table? Bob?
Just a minor clarification. Could you be clear on what is in the indirect costs number?
Yeah, so indirect costs comprise of expenses that, so for the finance director, accountant, town accountant, treasurer, all the services that the sewer enterprise fund uses from the general government throughout the year are captured with indirect expense charges. So the time that Joe spends, on wastewater ultimately gets trickled back and we reimburse the general fund. In addition to direct costs for town staff, that also covers a portion of the benefits for employees within the wastewater department for health insurance, and things like that.
So it's both the costs that are being transferred to you from the non-wastewater people, like Joe, and all of the fringe benefits?
Correct.
So nothing's in salary and wages, it's all in indirect costs for all of the employees?
Yes.
Thank you.
So when I come back to update with the benefits for the proposed full-time position, you'll see an increase in the indirect expense line item, not the salary and wage line item.
Thank you.
Okay, Mark, you okay?
Nope, yep.
Nope, yep, okay. Michelle?
Good.
Dan? Okay. Dana?
Hello?
Any questions?
I just would say, on the numbers we've been talking about, they're gonna get clearer by the time we have to make a motion at town meetings. So in terms of the 270 whatever thousand, that decision can be made closer to town meeting, so we'll make the correct decision then.
All right, thank you.
As to
Karen?
what we need a portion of it and
Yep, Karen?
whether we don't.
Karen?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Mark? Kelleher?
You hear me? Yeah, by the way, thank you, Peter, Michelle, Noreen, and Dan for doing that 40-year debt schedule. That's very, very helpful. My only question is, if the state changes the rules, do you have a standby 20-year budget that will anticipate those increased costs?
I would think the answer is we budget year at a time, 1 year to the next year, and react to what the situation is. I don't know anybody that does a 20-year plan. The capital plan tries to anticipate the next 5 years the best we can. So I think that, the work would be in the capital plan as to, at least just my suggestion, as opposed to what a budget might look like, 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years out. I mean, it's all throwing darts at the wall as far as I know.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
Michelle? Yep.
Yeah, I just had a question on the admin.
You have to speak up so that they can hear you.
Yeah, sorry. I was just curious, the relationship between the line 591500 and 591550. That's the interest on long-term debt and admin fee long-term debt. I was just looking at the 2023 budget, the 141 versus the 254, versus the 26 versus the 216 in the 2024. So I was just trying to understand how that's determined.
So, the fee for fiscal year '24, the 26,216, is the fee that the Clean Water Trust charges the town. The difference between that number and the 141, if you look at the first column, FY '23 wastewater debt budget, the wastewater Pleasant Bay watershed contracts 1 and 2, you'll see that 141,803 figure. That 141,803 was what we had anticipated, in 2021 would be the administrative fees. The 660 and the 141 did not include the 25% principal forgiveness that we were receiving from the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund. So there was a significant reduction in principal and fees when that was captured, which is reflected in the '24 budget.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Dan.
All right, if there's no
3
more on
minutes left.
wastewater, let's jump over to the water one.
Oh, hang on one second.
Sorry.
Joe came up with a question and a seemingly very important one.
Well, I was distracted. I was doing math when you were saying, based on the work that you've been doing with Hilltop, you made a statement about what number should actually be in the operating budget. Can you walk me through that again? I want to make sure I capture that.
The general fund subsidy amount in your operating budget in that upper line, is that what you're referring to? That, in my opinion, should be the 108 less the 1693 we just backed out.
So, yep, let me go back. So the 1,106,550 should go in place of the 761.
Correct.
So that's what I was afraid of what he said. You know, that's gonna have a cascading effect through our Article 4 operating budget. And so I'm gonna plug those numbers in under a new column to just keep track of that. But that's about a $400,000 delta to the higher. So I just wanna put that out there for now. Thanks, Dan.
Noreen?
Can I just make one general statement to help
Okay.
this all fit in? You know, it's funny the way the world works with numbers, but had not that chain of events happened where our former finance director had booked the number before the changes in the Clean Water Trust and everything else, we would really be in a bad position now. We'd be down, you know, about $1 million beyond Henry's estimate of 761. But through that, you know, unusual thing happening by the timing that it did, yes, it will be probably another 350 to 400,000 additional, but that sits with most people a lot better than $1 million, so.
Thank you. Joe, you're all set?
Yep, thank you.
Peter, do you have a follow-up?
That's also why when you start talking about what goes on in 20 years from now and what could change and whatnot, that's a prime example. Something in the last year or two changed and, you know, it has a big impact, so, you know.
All right, Joe, go ahead.
All right, I will try to be brief. So I guess I'll just look to highlight some of the bigger items in the water department budget and defer to the board members for questions. I believe Joe's statement about the enhancement of services carries forward to the water department budget discussion as well. But beyond that, what we see reflected in the water enterprise salary and wages are related to contractual increases. The field union staff contract was just settled this year. And one thing that I found interesting, I just want to throw out there, when I went back to FY20 actuals, our salary and wage line item total was in the neighborhood of 1.3 million. And you see that it dropped in FY21 to 1.2 and budgeted for FY23 is 1.29. We did have a decent amount of senior level staff retire over the last couple of years, so what we're seeing in the 6.87% increase in salary and wages is not just the contractual agreement between the union and the town, but also people progressing through the steps and the positions, so that's part of that 6.87. Moving into the expense line item, to highlight some of the bigger changes, we did have a sizable increase of 11.12% to our electric utility budget. That's based on the cost of electricity increase that we're all hearing, as well as projections from year-to-date to end of fiscal year. We decreased our vehicle and maintenance item based on actuals. Another big reduction you'll see is to the building and grounds maintenance line item, which reduced from 130 to 52,000. We had a handful of debt fall off last year, which is where we had reappropriated that money to the building and grounds maintenance line item. So we're now reducing that back out. The fact that we did that did allow us to, we had, as I'm sure you're aware, 2 wells fail this year, and we've had to do a number of repairs and upgrades that I'm grateful that that debt fell off and we were able to keep that money in there. But we are reducing that back down to normal levels for next fiscal year. Moving forward to the professional services line item. Let's see. This is this increase based on actuals for the prior fiscal year. Moving downward, some of the other big changes. I would say, let's see. Treatment supplies, again, reducing based on actuals. Treatment chemicals had a pretty sizable increase this year. The chemical we use, potassium hydroxide, not mistaken, it's somehow tied to Russia and Ukraine. I think they make the majority of it, so we've seen a big price increase on that chemical. Another big item that I would like to highlight is the pipes, valves, and fittings. Let's see, my notes here. Which we increased based on actuals. Our water main replacement line item went up 142% from 35,000 to 85,000. The reason for that increase is, as the town administrator noted at the last meeting, the Azalea Drive Bridge is being replaced, and we have a $50,000 non-participatory cost for replacing the water infrastructure around that bridge as part of that project, so we're carrying that within the water main replacement line item. Moving down, generator maintenance increased based on actuals. What else do we have? So that pretty much highlights the bigger increases and decreases that we've had. And I would look to the board for any questions on those.
Excellent. Peter, I'll start with you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So if I read this right, the total increase is 4%,
Year over year.
grand total.
Bottom of the page.
I'm looking at the bottom of the page in the right-hand corner.
You're looking at the Munis one.
It must be true because it's here, so that's okay. You can,
Well, the 4.7, is that the one next to the $9.7 million number?
no, I'm looking at percentage change.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah.
That, that $9 million number, I don't know how Munis prints these reports. We don't have $9 million in the bank. I think that's a combination of retained earnings, the budget. Our total expense increase 6.8, and wages is 8.8. But I wouldn't hang my hat on the 4% just because.
So what they did was, excuse me for interrupting you, but what they did, it looks like, is they added revenue and expenses, which is an awfully odd thing to do. Anne Marie, well, Anne Marie.
Anne Marie.
I have revised reports because when those were printed, Megan didn't realize that she had to have the revenue as a credit, so that's why I
Thank
just
goodness,
added it.
okay. That answers that one, okay. Could
He's out.
Thank you, Anne Marie.
Could I just ask one more question? And when I look at these things in your department in particular, what I say is, okay, was there growth? And by growth, I mean increased number of services, for whatever reason, connections or whatever.
Mhm.
So do you have an idea how many new hookups there were in the last year, sort of? Thank you.
About 30.
30?
Yeah, we range 30 to 50 between new
Out of how many
installations.
total? Out of how many in total?
How many service connections do we have
Yeah.
on the water side?
Yeah.
10,100.
Okay, so a minuscule amount of growth, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It's just either renovated or new housing.
Yeah, no, I understand. Now I'm talking about new service, like we're growing, sort of thing, okay. All right, so let me quickly get to my board at the table here. Any questions? Bob?
Back to the top line, the indirect costs. Is there a detail of what makes up the $800,000?
Yes. I'm sure I do because you printed it out. All right. So, of the 818, $737,413 is health insurance, life insurance, retirement, property and vehicle insurance, workers' comp, Medicare, and our portion of the town's audit. $81,499 is chargebacks for the town administration, accounting, and the treasurer collector's department.
Great, thank you.
Okay, now out in TV land, Dana?
I'm good so far. Thank
Okay,
you.
Karen?
I'm good as well, thank you.
Okay, Mark Kelleher? We're good, thank you.
Don?
I'm good.
Julie?
I'm fine.
Larry?
I'm fine.
Joe?
Good, thank you.
Dan?
I'm good.
Excellent. I think we're good for now.
8 minutes old.
Yeah. Noreen?
Would now be the proper time to talk about the merits of the new position, or would that come at a separate selectmen's meeting?
That was
or-
my top question, Noreen, but given the time and the schedule, I'm gonna say that we'll do it. The finance committee has you in, and we will have you in as well. What Dan sent us last night is a very descriptive job description. So I think that speaks for itself. We have talked about this, we talked about this last year.
10 years.
So, I have some questions. I certainly have some questions, because it started as a half-time position, now it's evolved back into a full-time position. So certainly we'll have you before us to discuss that.
Great. Thank you.
Peter's gonna
Thanks.
zap her under the table, and he's gonna zap me if I go any more close. I already have.
Well, let's stay longer then.
Thank you all for coming. Yeah.
Thank you.
Are we adjourned?
I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
So next on your schedule, you'll see is our fire department. So as Chief LeBlanc and Deputy Chief Thornton come forward, I will tell you that in the reports that you folks have, the munis reports, you'll see that the fire department, Department 220, their expense recap is on the general ledger expense, page 10, and their revenue statement is on general ledger revenue report, page 4. And as you've heard, the fire chief is looking for adds to staff, enhancement of services. And so, with that, Mr. Chairman, I would defer to our fire chief.
Good morning.
Good morning. David Blank, Fire Chief, Deputy Chief Thornton. So just, I don't want to, some of this is going to be a little bit of a rehash from some stuff we've talked about before, but I think it's relative because we are talking about staffing and making everybody understand why, why we're looking for this. So, our budget increases are based on a couple of different things. The first one is, as Dan indicated and everybody's aware, just cost of everything is more expensive this year. We budgeted 10% more for utilities, fuel's up, all those things are up. One of the pressures we're feeling is our protective equipment is about a $1,500 increase per set. So it went from $3,500 a set to $5,000 a set. So that, we buy 6 a year to keep everybody current with the standard. But those are all increases that we're seeing across the budget. The second one, probably the biggest part of it, is some personnel changes, and those are come in 2 forms. We're looking for 4 new positions, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I also have been notified by 3 members that they could potentially retire this year. So with that, we have to budget their contractual buyouts as for both sick time and vacation time, in addition to what the cost would be to hire new employees, 3 new employees to replace them. So that's fire academy coverage time, physicals, background investigations, all that is part of that. So that's what it drives that number, and that is about 7% of our total ask this year. I'm gonna try really hard for the rest of this conversation not to talk in percents, because the percents are a little bit misleading when you look at the munis reports. The vacation buyout's up 831%, the amount is $50,000. Not that that's insignificant, but when you see 800%, you get scared. When you see $50,000, it's not quite as scary. And then the final place where we added some funding back in was places that have been cut in the past as we've tried to maintain a balanced budget with training fund increase, normal overtime adjustments so we can provide the coverage that we need to provide. And one other thing for the training reason, as we lose the retirees, we're losing a valuable amount of experience from the department. And we need to make up for that in another way, and the way we make up for that is by training. So we typically have budgeted for 16 hours per member for outside classes, Mass Fire Academy classes. This bumps it up to 24. We've always ended up cutting that number back. I've tried to increase it slowly, and we end up going back to that 16. So this year is increased to 24 to try and allow people to take a 2 or 3 day class and get some valuable experience. Our staffing model that we use relies heavily on overtime, and there's 2 kinds of overtime. There's emergency overtime, which is what we use to cover the station and respond to incidents. And then there's regular shift overtime that covers leave and everything else. That number is kind of a fixed number. We need to maintain a certain level of staffing, and that's not what we're talking about here. The emergency overtime is really, it's a way we supplement staffing with overtime. The equivalent of that is about 12%. I said I wasn't gonna use it, but 8,000 hours of emergency overtime, calling people back from their homes to come in to respond to the station, to either cover the station or man a truck for a second incident or multiple incidents. When we start the day, we have 7 people on duty. That's our minimum. Each ambulance call takes 2 to 3 out of town, usually 3, and we hire personnel back to cover. The unfortunate part of that is we end up with one person in the station by themselves for a period of time until that coverage can come in. So if you're the first call at 8 o'clock in the morning, you get 3 people in an ambulance, you're good. If you're the second call at 8, 10 in the morning, you get another 3 people in the ambulance and you're good. If you're that third call and it comes in at 8:15, at that point, you're probably gonna get one person. We'll call for a mutual aid truck, we'll recall people off duty to come in, but that's a delay, that's an inherent delay. So we've always tried to work toward getting the same level of service for everybody, no matter when they call. It's a little bit of a challenge to do that, and financially, it's not prudent to have enough people on duty at the beginning of the day for everything that might happen. The funny part is, and I was thinking about this as I was driving in this morning, the system we're using is not all that different than when the department was founded 100 years ago. So we relied on off-duty response. Originally, it was, somebody called and said, my house is on fire and there's a telephone tree. One person called 2 people called 4 people, and so on, and that was how the fire department was staffed. We've changed how we do that, but we're still relying on those people coming in from home. So as we look at that, our goals are twofold here. Number one is to provide a better level of service to the community with having more personnel available, and number 2 is not to leave that one person alone. That's an unenviable position, having been in it. Deputy's been in it multiple times. I had a house fire that was a quarter mile from my house. There was the first person there. There was somebody inside the house. You're going to make a decision. You're going to do something. And that's typically what we try and avoid, is ever putting one person in harm's way. But that's the current model we have right now. Last year, we started this conversation and we looked at a grant possibility for hiring some personnel. With that, we were looking to increase the shift minimum to 8. We were trying to get that one person to never be alone. The other reason kind of long-term working on this is our callback area is 6 miles from either fire station to be eligible for callback. People can't afford to buy houses in that area when they start out here. So that is gonna, over time, we're gonna lose that pool of people that are eligible to come back for calls because they can't afford to live in that 6-mile radius. And then the second thing is we've seen over time, and it's not as much in Harwich as it is with other towns, but a change in workforce lifestyle, I guess I'll call it. People's priorities are a little bit different than they used to be. Wives work, they have families, so we don't have the number of people that come back for overtime that used to. It's not as significant in Harwich. Again, we have a really good core group of people to come back, but 1/3 of our workforce does 70% of the emergency overtime. That's a pretty significant number. So those are other things we're seeing. Other towns around us are starting to have people that don't come back. Their stations go unstaffed for long periods of time. We're trying to avoid that. So the long-term goal would be to start the day with enough people on duty to handle the majority of what happens, and then rely on that emergency overtime only a little bit. So this year's plan, after some conversations that started out with the chair of the board and the town administrator, we said, let's go for the 4 positions, but we're gonna show an overtime savings. So we're gonna still maintain our 7-man minimum, our 7-person minimum, but we're gonna increase shift strength to 9. That affords us about a $200,000 savings in overtime. We're not covering vacation, sick leave, those things for that second person that's off. So then the plan would be slowly to start to increase the overtime back to get to that 8-person minimum, but realizing we gotta crawl before we walk and walk before we run. So if we can get the personnel on board, it does give us more personnel available for recall. It does give us more personnel available sometimes just by the nature of people came to work and people aren't off. And hopefully we'll end up in a better position, and then slowly we can increase the overtime to a point where we can increase that shift staffing to 8, which would be the short-term goal of our plan. So that's pretty much the big part of the budget. Certainly there's other increases that, we're prepared to talk about, but I figured we'd put a statement out and then kind of go with questions and start from there.
Perfect. Thank you, Dave. Peter?
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Deputy. It's always a dilemma. It's been that way for eons about overtime versus new bodies. I mean, there's no magic to it, right? I mean, it's just, you gotta deal with it. You're in the public service and public safety business, you know that. So when I look at this, first of all, when you talk about 4 new people coming on board, do they all have to go to the academy? Do you expect to be some folks that are already, say, a firefighter EMT somewhere else that may want to come here, or how do you see that breaking down?
I would say we budgeted for all of them to go to the academy. We may get fortunate, and we've done that in the past, where somebody's wanted to come work from another department, come work here. This town, we're blessed that we've always had a pretty good reputation, and people enjoy working in Harwich, but we're not gonna count on that.
Okay, so,
The pool is pretty dry right now of applicants. If you look around us, Orleans is talking about hiring 8, Brewster's looking at hiring 4, Chatham's trying to hire, so I would not expect that we're gonna get.
okay, so assuming that, this gets through town meeting in whatever form, and we say we're gonna go get 4 new individuals, and they go to the academy and whatnot, how long before they actually make a difference on the shifts, on the coverage on the shift, like the 9 people show up? Is it 6 months later, 3 months later?
In theory, right away, because the academy is about a 9-month delay to get them to, and there's budgeted money in there to cover them when they go to the academy. So in theory, if we could find 4 people who are trained at firefighter 1-2, which is our baseline, they still have to go to the state academy. But if we can find them, we should be able to put them in play right away. I would say, say we
Okay,
hire for
and
July
then
1st.
they basically work, and then when they can go to the academy, you get a slot, you put them in as you need to, and eventually, over the course of, 16 months or something, they get through the academy, right?
Yeah, we're sending our last hire that was hired in December, it's not going to the academy until August.
Okay.
So there's a delay to get them to the academy. The other piece of that is, we did hire, in the last year, somebody who had no firefighter training. Gave them the basic firefighter training in-house, enough that we could put them on the floor and use them as staff until they could go to the academy, and then 9 months later, he went to the academy. So if that were to happen, and we hired 2 qualified people, or 2 good candidates that were not fully trained, we can have the ability to train them in-house, and that would be like maybe a month, 6-week delay before we could put them in.
Okay, so for our benefit in the finance committee, I just request we get the salary and wages associated with those 4, and any benefits, and any additional stuff, like you gotta go buy,
Right.
gear for 'em and all that kind of stuff. Let us know what I'll just call the total cost. Now, we could have a discussion later about how much you're gonna save in overtime and all that, but, to bring these people on board, we wanna know what the total cost is, and so budget going forward. You can send that to us or get it to us, whatever reflected in the budget.
We have it broken down.
Yeah. The other question is, and I don't want to hog all the time here, but year over year, number of calls, that's something always people look at and say, well, how many more responses do we have this year than last year, or maybe, whatever.
So we're about, this year, we kind of plateaued. We were on a trend before COVID happened. We were increasing at about 5% a year. COVID, we actually saw a reduction during that year, which was kind of strange, thinking, because it was a medical thing, but nobody wanted anybody in their house, so people weren't calling.
Oh, okay.
And then as people started to figure out, we started getting some really sick people that called, but there was still a reduction overall. People didn't want to go to the emergency room. They didn't want people in their house. So we've kind of come back up to where we are. We're doing about 4,800 runs a year, which is about what we've done for 2 or 3 years. So we're kind of holding steady at that.
All right, thank you. The last question I have is, and I'll have the wrong terminology, but Fontaine is basically operating emergency care service and whatnot. I'm assuming, because I remember when they first went there, we ended up with a significant number of runs that came out of Fontaine. Is that still the case?
It hasn't increased from what it did. So we had like a 700% increase in the first year, because it was really a doctor's office before that. But that has held steady. we still see about the same amount of calls a year. I don't have a breakdown, I can get that for you, but.
Well, no,
yeah.
I'm just curious
Yeah,
in
it
general.
hasn't
again.
been a dramatic increase. The Orleans Fontaine that opened, for lack of a better word, the urgent care, really had minimal impact on our number of calls. We looked at it, I think we dropped 3 runs because of 3 incidents because of it. So even though that's open and fully operating for the summer, it didn't really impact our number of Fontaine runs for the year.
Okay, and even though people, they go to Fontaine, it's like a regional ER kind of thing, not just Harwich, so you might end up transporting Brewster people, or, I mean,
Yep.
Chatham people,
Yes.
whatever, right?
Yep.
And except for our insurance reimbursement thing, is there any other recognition of a cost that we have to provide more service because it happens to be in Harwich, or how's that work?
There's no additional cost, I mean, the cost of that ambulance call would be the same as the cost of any other ambulance call. They're really easy ambulance calls to do, which is something that's significant. They're a fast turnaround because the patient is prepped before we get there for the most part. But the cost is basically the same. What we're getting is the ambulance revenue on the backside. If the patient was a Brewster patient, that we probably wouldn't have normally gotten that ambulance revenue.
Okay, and does Brewster ever come and pick up people? I know they would in,
Occasionally, if we're busy, they'll come pick them up.
yeah,
But
okay.
for the most part, it's, we handle it on our own, and that's.
Okay, I understand. All right,
working out pretty
let me
well.
open up to my board. Questions from the folks sitting at the table?
Can you come back to me?
All right.
Go ahead.
Okay. Assuming that all the personnel cost changes are in the detail line items, what kind of stuff is in the 2 EOS categories that you're using? The one in personnel and the one down in expenses?
So the 2 ES, the salary and wages EOS is $333,000 of salary and wages, which would include their base salary, educational incentive, vacation, holiday time, all those figures. And then it has the $200,000 offset of overtime. So we're anticipating about $213,000 in overtime savings. So that's in that EOS. So that's why it's only $120,000.
Okay.
Because it's 330 minus the 200 in overtime. For the purposes of establishing the enhancement of service, that's how it's budgeted. My expectation would be if it were approved, I would go back and adjust my individual categories within my overtime line item and reduce those numbers. To reflect that 213. But for the sake of discussion,
Yep.
this is easier because if for some reason it's not approved, then all we have to do is delete that one line item and everything goes back to the way it was. So it's just simpler. Simple math.
So the new overtime is part of the net EOS, it's not up in overtime, is that?
Right.
What you?
Yes.
Okay.
So the overtime was increased and then we deducted what the savings would be in the EOS category. So.
Okay.
And then the expenses is uniforms, personal protective equipment, medical exams, anything that's required with hiring 4 people. That's what that expense increase is.
Okay, so it's line item stuff.
Yep.
But in this case, it's for the new 4 people.
Which is why it's in the EOS category, yes.
Got it, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, anybody else?
Then my question is about
Yep.
the last item, 5, 7, 8,000 other.
Yeah, 153% increase.
It's about 50K. What's that 50K for?
So 50K is, majority of it, I believe, is the new hire personal protective equipment. We talked about those sets going up. That's enhancement of services. Let's just look at it.
I mean, if you're confident it's PPE related.
Yeah, so it's anything related, so that's the category we capture, everything for a new hire. So 3 new hires, so it'd be 6 sets of personal protective equipment, 6 sets of uniforms, all that, so that's why that's up that much.
Okay,
I just-
Michelle?
Yeah, I just was curious, what is captured in the medical service line? That's 530,600. So that's, I guess,
Oh, medical services.
yeah.
So, that's vaccines that we do for personnel, that's where pre-employment physicals are captured for new hires. Physical agility exam that they have to take to go to the fire academy is in there. our yearly assessment to Cape and Islands EMS, which is our governing body that, for how we operate in the EMS system in Barnstable County, is in there. Any ambulance licensing fees are in there. Any tuitions for recertification of EMTs and paramedics is in there. Our training program that we use for all our EMS training is in there. Service equipment for our service contracts for defibrillators, stretchers, and all that equipment is in there. And that's actually all of our medical supplies are also in there.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, you good? Dan, you got any? Okay, so we're going out to TV land, Dana? Speak quick, we're running behind schedule, so.
morning. Yeah. Good morning, Chief. Just say, usually we have this conversation in-house in your office, but I'm away this year. I just know it's a big ask, and there's a lot of money involved, and Peter's request for getting exactly what these personnel will cost is important, and we have to find a way to fit it in.
Okay,
That's all
thank
I
you,
got.
thank you, Dana. Karen?
I'm good, thank you.
Mark Kelleher? Mark?
Okay. Yeah, I'm on. Hey, how you doing, Chief? Just a quick question, a couple of questions. Is the SAFER grant off the table for this year?
Yeah, I believe we've missed the window for it.
Okay. Off Cape, I did a little survey. For example, Plymouth has a private ambulance services, 2 people on the ambulance. Marshfield they just hire paramedics. They have about a 15-mile run to South Shore Hospital. They just run 2 paramedics. And what I found with some other fire departments is they'll send the ambulance with 2 personnel, but also send a car out with 1 or 2 people. And if the patient is ALS, you know, the person in the car will hop in the ambulance, and therefore you'll have an ALS ambulance to the hospital. That's a model that would seem to work and help us in terms of not leaving somebody alone at the station, which I totally agree with. But and just before you come in, can we run BLS, basic life services? I get a bad cut or I break my hand. Can we run people to Fontaine rather than all the way up to Cape Cod Hospital?
Okay, so last question first. No, we can't. Our service agreement does not allow us to transport to Fontaine. It's not a licensed intake facility for ambulance services, and that's governed by the state. First question, we do, based on the severity of the call, often send a car and transport with 2 and bring, and have the other person come back. But the majority of calls, based on how we're required to treat the patients based on our protocols, require 3 people in the back, or 2 people in the back for the transport, which is 3 people on the call. And with our time to the hospital, which is 20 minutes, that gives the patient the best care. It's a model that we're comfortable running. It gives the best service for the patient, and ultimately, I think gives the most just the best outcome on the call. And if you look at the majority of the Cape Towns, they all run, even Hyannis, where the hospital's in town, they run with 3 personnel in the ambulance, for that reason, to give the best patient care.
So Mark and Chief,
Yeah.
what I suggest is if you guys want to follow up on this outside of this meeting, maybe you can make an appointment with the chief. He'd be happy to talk to you about, different scenarios and whatnot, and let us know if anything comes of it, or we can have it in front of the Finance Committee as a discussion at some point in time. So we'll leave it at that. You have anything else, Mark?
No, that's it. Thank you, Chief.
Okay, thanks, we're good.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for the record, I mean, I understand where Bob was coming from and where Dana was coming from. I had that same problem. I'm trying to figure out, I'm very supportful of adding the staff, always have been, was last year, but I'm trying to get my head wrapped around. I've never actually seen us appropriate with an increment to add staff. And I get it's a chicken and the egg problem, because if you don't get the article approved to add the staff, then you don't change the overtime. But as I said, I'm still trying to get my head wrapped around how you budget at town meeting for an increment rather than an add with true cost. Because the true cost of it is a lot more than what's being expressed.
Without getting wrapped around the after, and I'm the last person when it comes to budgeting that's gonna, but if I can understand it, I think I can explain it. The simple solution is, the EOS for adding personnel is $300,000. That will go into our salary and wages line item, all with the appropriate 4 positions. So 2 paramedics, 2 firefighters, and everything that goes along with them across that spreadsheet. In the overtime account, we will then go through and make reductions to the different categories, vacation coverage, sick time coverage, et cetera, based on the percentage needed to cover, and that number will come down by 213,000.
I get it, but I'm still troubled by going to a town meeting and asking them for appropriation that's not really appropriating it to the place that it's gonna wind up going to, except for the summary line item. Because there's a
Yeah,
lot of
I-
moving parts within that to get to that
The-
point.
I understand, I just, the flip side of the coin would be, if it didn't happen, would be then having to go back in and redo the budget to put all those different categories back in, which in the past, when that's happened, has been problematic.
I don't expect to resolve it today, I just wanted to bring it out.
Okay.
Yeah, something for us to work.
Yeah, okay.
Julie?
No, my couple of questions were answered, but on that note, I appreciate what you're saying, and I get it. But I also like the idea that it's in there, because it's almost like the capital plan, you know, we know what's coming, and it's in there, and it's fixed. So whatever way we can discuss that, but I do like the idea of knowing.
Joey, make a note for our board meeting to discuss that. Larry?
Well, thank you for your presentation. I unfortunately, I'm a little confused too, so I need to study it a little bit, because this, the budget you've presented today does not include the 4 additions that you're talking about.
This does.
But you're saying that,
Pre-deduction.
No, it's the deductions in there as well. So
but Dave, if it's included then, but it's not, what I'm mystified is, if it's included, the salary and wages, you said we're gonna decrease by 200, it's actually increased, right? So you'll decrease it later on, is that what you're saying?
So our salary and wages line item, if you look at, or the salary and wages portion of our budget is broken down into base salary and wages,
Right.
overtime.
No, I got all that, I'm
Yep,
just trying to
well,
figure
no,
out.
so those categories, so salary and wages, overtime, educational incentive, longevity, those are all portions of that.
Right,
That's the big account, but it has those sub-accounts underneath it. So the total salary and wages increase is $333,599.
okay.
The total overtime reduction by covering one less person is a $200,000 reduction. So when you take the 333, subtract the 213, you get the 120, but it's all in there. All that money is accounted for.
Okay, so all right.
I have another document that I can submit. I'll send it. That's what I
That'd
would
be
send to
good.
FinCom.
Maybe
I'll send
give
it.
the subcategories
Yep,
so it
yep.
makes sense, because when you look at your overall, it's still a little tough to follow.
Yep. But it's all,
'Cause
it's accounted for in that whole budget, so that, there wouldn't be any hidden numbers in our big budget number.
Because we've had this discussion before, I think. Just, my gut feeling is I like full-time people a little better than overtime. For financial reasons,
Yes.
just training
Yep.
and things going on. So I applaud the direction you're going. I'm just trying to figure out.
Okay.
I think we need to understand this when we present it.
Anything you send to the finance committee, send to the board as well,
Will do.
please.
Yep.
And it really goes for the entire, any questions asked today that we're getting answers, let's make sure we all share documents, and then we'll share them with the public in next week's packet as well.
Okay.
Anything extra that we get that we can share.
Sure.
Joe, are you set on this one, or?
I want to take my shot. I want to thank the deputy for his in-depth input.
Crazy, huh?
Thank you, gentlemen.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
I missed that, Joe. What did the deputy do? That work?
It's a thing Craig and I have going on.
No,
Less is more.
Yeah.
Less is more.
Clearly, you're here to support the chief.
We appreciate your support,
you,
I
Craig.
guess.
So next up, you have the building department, Department 241. As Jack comes before us, and I'm not sure that everyone has met, this is our building commissioner, Jack Mees. Jack, I always forget what town I stole you from, but I'm so glad I did. And Jack joins us not only as our building commissioner, but a local. For your reports that you have, you're gonna look at the general ledger expense report, building department starts on page 11. And for the general ledger revenue, that information starts on page 4. And Jack joins us this morning because he has some significant enhancement of services that impact upon the personnel side. And I want to emphasize, and I should have done this earlier, for the fire department. These are the enhancement of services that I've recommended, that the board has carried forward over to this moment. So what Jack is presenting this morning is something that I've endorsed. And then with that, Mr. Chairman, if I could turn it over to our building commissioner.
Excellent, thank you.
Good morning, all. So as Joe just laid out, the big portion that I'm here this morning to talk about is the enhancement of services. I put in 3 requests. The first one is to convert a 19-hour part-time building inspector's position to be a full-time benefited position for the department. The second request is to add a position, full-time position that would work both with planning, zoning, to be up front to help applicants who are coming forward, whether they're special permit, variances, et cetera, and/or could help out on the zoning enforcement side. There's a lot of complaints, concerns that come in from citizens throughout the town that need, you know, a considerable amount of time for investigation and bring to compliance. And the third is a request to hire a part-time position, basically to cover ZBA historic clerk work, doing the minutes from the hearings, and that's currently being done by the 2 admins within the building department staff, which is taking away valuable time for their services to add to our department. So that's it in a nutshell of what I'm bringing to the table, and here to answer any questions that go along with that.
Thank you. Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In addition to that, I also want to recognize our Director of Planning and Community Development, Paul Halkiotis, who joins us here in support of our building commissioner. Jack and Paul have been working on these. This is coming through the building department, but much of what Jack's talking about is a support that Paul can also speak to for community development and the regulatory bodies. And so I also want to give him a chance to be recognized, so.
Thank you. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one quick question. Clearly, the enhanced services, are they residing here or out in the field, for the most part?
These positions mostly right here in-house.
So it's processing stuff?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Julie?
No, thank you. I think that both, well, all of these positions are important. I know that the building department has been, you know, really overwhelmed, similar to conservation, so I certainly support those items. And the only other thing I'm thinking of, because I deal with the building department for work, is there any money in your budget to address, you know, I know town hall's shrinking in terms of storage space, that files and such that are in the basement, and I know difficult for staff to reach. I mean, we should be looking at how you can better that system too, because that's an overwhelming draw on whoever you assign to do those things, to get those files. You know, I know at one point, we got some feedback from the public that, you know, they were being told to wait, you know, a couple weeks to get files. And we, you know, I get a week even, but like we can't put it off that much, that could impact sales, et cetera. So I'm just wondering if you've even had time to look at that.
I have not. I can speak in my past role. We were just in the process of a large portion of the project. The town received a grant. We were an outside vendor was scanning and putting those all up on a common drive, which was phenomenal.
Right.
And not only a benefit to our department, I do a lot of historic researches, particularly when complaints come forward or problems with a property or a project, but, you know, it's there for the general public, and, as I get caught up with building permits, that are sitting, waiting action, I can certainly take a look and bring, suggestions forward, and,
No, that's great, because, I mean, all of these items that you describe and the assistance with the different boards and such are critical, and I can't imagine that staff is able to do all this. So,
they are running ragged, and we do have a fabulous staff that, you know, I walked in on, and they're very dedicated, and I can't say enough good things about their efforts.
Larry?
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Jack. One of the joys of being in the select board is receiving complaints. And the building.
All right.
The building has been, you know, as Julie talks, the delays have been one of the favorite topics that we get friendly calls and emails on. So I appreciate your enhancements. Let me ask you a couple of questions. In terms of the part-time person to cover the, and this may be as much for Joel as for you, would that be better positioned as administrative position to cover various boards rather than be assigned to just one department?
Which one was the specific one you were mentioning?
The part-time person to help, basically clerk for the planning and zoning, rather than sit one department, is that more of an administrative function, so it's spread across? That's probably a question more for Joel than for
So,
you.
yeah, that's then the funding of the ZBA clerk?
Yeah.
So I think the way we
To
talked
use
about.
across different departments, ZBA and planning, because that's a need not only your committee has, but others as well.
If I recall, that's where we're talking from a staff level about the zoning administrator and the ZBA clerk, that it's called that and it resides in building, but it does support
It wouldn't
zoning
be
board
tied
of
to
appeals,
just one,
planning
it'd
board,
be
and
across.
department.
Okay,
Correct.
and my second question is, in addition to the enhanced staffing you've talked about, I know we're trying to catch up on the computer end of that. Hasn't helped us out in the past. So what's your feeling on it? Are we catching up on that could save a lot of time too. People can go online, and I'm just asking I know that's on our big discussion, how we're to catch up. Are we making progress?
On the permitting?
Right.
Yes, we went live maybe 2 months ago. It was in the works, when I got here. We have, kicked it off live. It is showing, dividends. It is brand new, and, it doesn't come without its hiccups, and, so, Alicia out of our office has by default become our permitting software quarterback, and you know, sadly at this point it's almost daily contact with the vendor to rectify different issues. But it's showing wonderful dividends already through my eyes.
Can we set aside time then for training of our staff to be, you know, so that's fully utilized and maybe respond better to these questions, or is it self-explanatory?
Jack, I'm gonna try to.
Go ahead.
And I'm gonna try and reel this back in. This sounds like a great topic for a Board of Selectmen's meeting. We caught up on 3 minutes on the last presentation. We got 7 minutes to catch up
Well,
on, so this is not related to the budget request, so I'm gonna bring that back to the board
Okay,
level.
and that's fine. The reason I ask is it's only related, Michael, in the sense of having enough resources to do the
Yeah.
position.
Yep.
Training would be the administration, not board, building.
One positive comment, I applied online for the first time, and it was fantastic. I didn't have to come down with my plans and everything, and I got a comment, because the project's going back to conservation, and I got that comment. I thought it went very well, so that's just feedback.
Good.
Joe?
Well, just to tie it all together, the comments about records, the town clerk and I could speak to that probably greater than Jack. Jack is one of the departments that benefits from the King Information System that the clerk's office runs. The town clerk had nothing to do with it. I had nothing to do with it, the town clerk did. Brought them in recently to update that. So we're doing a lot of technological advancements. What Jack was talking about for permitting is OpenGov. That was a grant from several years ago. We're now trying to tie it all together, so 18, 24 months from now, we might be able to talk about electronic records, ease of access of files, and everything that ties back. We still need the positions that are referenced to get us to that point as well.
Thank you, Joe. Peter?
Thank you, Jack, for coming in. Nice to meet you. I don't think our board has seen you before. So again, I'll ask salary and wages plus, true cost, total cost, benefits, et cetera, to be provided to us on all of these. Do you have a priority of these positions, these changes? You have 3 of them. Is there, like one that's the most important, and are they all equally, in your mind, just?
In my mind, to get the department up, functioning, providing the service that the residents and the contractors are due, I believe that these are all equally weighted across the board.
Okay, so it's pretty much a comprehensive upgrade to the department, I guess is the way I would say it, right? I think that's a good way to sell it, not sell it, but at least talk about it.
Yep.
Do you have space for all these people?
Ideally, if that's the biggest problem that we face,
get 'em in?
we will certainly overcome that issue.
Okay, and we'll,
Jack doesn't, but I do.
okay, all right. And so with this new team in place, let's just call it that, the turnaround time for a typical applicant or, an inspection, that kind of thing, you'd see an improvement, I assume.
Absolutely.
I mean, would it be, I'm making this up, like from a 3-day turnaround to a 1-day turnaround, or a 2-week turnaround to a 3-day turnaround? I don't know, that's your business, but.
Yeah, it certainly will tighten things up. I am directed through Mass General Law that I need to approve or deny permit applications within 30 days of completeness. The town and the department has struggled. I have tightened that up quite a bit. We still have catching up to do. But part and parcel of this is to keep us compliant with Mass General Law and through my certification that I am deemed to follow through on those requirements.
Okay, so is it fair to say that in some instances, we're now not satisfying that 30-day turnaround? I mean, it's just.
Yes.
Okay, so we're basically out of compliance.
Yes.
I mean, okay.
Yes.
I think that's an important topic, too. Okay, I'm gonna turn it over to the folks at the table here. Anybody have any? Oh, Bob, I'm counting on you every time. You got a nice comment.
So the cost of all these either ads or increases is all in your EOS budget line item,
It's a yes.
right?
Yes.
Do you have any, I guess I'll call it transactional information, like permit numbers or something that you could provide to us as part of supporting the request for ads?
I can certainly provide you that. Would you like, some historic years up to?
That'd be great.
Yep.
And just
We need
so
a
as
report.
to understand the distinction, because what's that, probably two total FTEs, more or less, that are being added? I'd appreciate that, thank you.
Okay.
Bob, I think that the information you're looking for, except for the current year, would be in the annual reports to the towns. I know they list how many gas permits, electric permits,
Exactly.
et
Yep.
cetera, so.
That's probably where I'll go to, if you want that information, that'll be my resource to put together.
Yeah, I wouldn't go back too far.
Mr. Chairman, if I could interject, I want to be able to be credited with self-reporting on behalf of the town. We generally do not have that historical data, and it is something that we're trying to correct with Jack and the team. There's a reporting element, not required, but it's useful, that ties back to the reports that the Department of Revenue gives. And when I was trying to validate that and went back, the data's not there.
Yeah.
And that's a very simple metric that we need to, are required to capture, but it will demonstrate to everybody going forward the work that we know is there. So unfortunately, I do not have an expectation that we'll have solid historical data to
Yeah,
rely
okay,
upon.
all right.
But that's part of the problem we're trying to solve.
I understand. And to me, the best representation of what's needed is the gentleman sitting right here who's now running this department and came into a situation and, and says, hey, I need some help, it's not working. and he has a responsibility for the 30-day turnaround and whatnot, so I think that's very important. Other comments on the,
I have a bunch of operational questions, but I'll hold those for the selectmen's meeting in terms of, are you digitizing as you go? Are you delivering electronic documents, stuff like that?
okay.
Not today.
Michelle?
No.
Dan?
No.
Okay, Dana out there in TV land?
Yeah, you and Larry have already touched on it. The convincing town meeting that the turnaround's going to improve is going to be key to any kind of sport, I think.
He's definitely improved customer service. I mean, that's what we're focused on.
Yeah.
Okay. Mark Kelleher? Mark, you out there?
All set?
Okay. Karen?
Yeah, I wrote down something similar to what Bob was saying, but just a little bit more simple, I think, for the audience at town meeting is, what are the goals, the specific goals? And I know you talked about the 30-day turnaround. There must be a list of, primary goals for the department. And then where are we at currently, even if you just use this year? And then what's the projected improvement if we hire 2 FTEs worth of people? That's the kind of thing I think people would benefit from. But that's all I have.
Yep, okay. Thank you. We're good.
Thank you, Peter. So I would echo Larry's comments about the benefits of being a selectman and getting the emails and the phone calls. So I would say that this is desperately needed, and one for the general public, but also for the staff that you currently have, running ragged, trying to get their work done and getting interrupted constantly. So I support it and can't wait to see the numbers. This is an administrative thing, and I would like we'll put it on the agenda. Somebody asked where we're gonna put all these people, and your facial expression was priceless. We've had all kinds of reorganizations upstairs, and Joe says he'll find a place for him, or he has the space for him. I'd like to see what that looks like. And then, very soon, we're gonna hear from the conservation administrator about a position that she would like. Back to Selectman Ballantyne, he's been asking for at least 7 years for an org chart and who does what. I think this is a great opportunity for us to map out who's gonna do what and where they're gonna sit and how we can share positions. I don't think we need an assistant for everybody. I would rather see a decision made that maybe we're not hiring another part-time person, but maybe another full-time person. Instead of Amy's position and your part-time position, can it be one position? But I think we need to, the Board of Selectmen needs to have a conversation about who's gonna be where, who we already have, and who's gonna do what, and where they're gonna sit. The files are in the basement, but pretty soon we're gonna have employees in the basement with the files at the rate we're going, so. If we could add that to our agenda, Jeff. Thank you. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, next up, we have our police department. So as Chief Gilmet and Deputy Chief Considine come forward, you'll find in the general ledger expense page, page 9 is where their budget starts. General ledger revenue statement, page 4 is where their revenue starts. And I want to just put it out there right away. There is the concept and discussion of the police cruisers. The cost that we are aware of is $183,000. It does not yet appear in the capital plan. It will appear in the capital plan based on the Board of Selectmen's directive, and there is funding associated with that. So I wanted, again, a self-report as I turn it over to the chief.
Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Finance Committee, members of the board. I just wanted to start off by thanking you for giving us the opportunity to present our budget this morning, basically giving up a Saturday, although the weather is pretty lousy, so. We do appreciate this every year, you folks doing this, giving us an opportunity to present our budgets, and then obviously afford you an opportunity to ask some questions, so we can have an open line of communication as to where we're going. So thank you, and obviously I would be very remiss if I did not thank our administrative assistant, Kate Varley, who is in the trenches with these numbers every day, and she is an absolutely huge resource for us. We've invited invited her along several times, but for some reason she's refused.
She could dial in.
I'm sure she could do this presentation much better than I. And of course, my Deputy Chief Kevin Considine, who I'm going to be deferring to answer the majority of the questions. So I'll be doing a little of the color, and he's going to be doing the play-by-play, if you will. So just by way of lead-in, I think it's important for the police department to identify, the challenges we're up against as we move into this next budget year, and then the priorities that we have identified for this upcoming budget year. So by way of challenges, I think it's not totally off base for me to say and for you to believe at this point that it's very difficult time in our history to be a police officer. Very stressful. If you think of, rolling into the COVID-19 pandemic, and then coming out of that with the public unrest and increased police scrutiny, and then resulting in a lot of changes for us in the way of police reform. So that has put a lot on the shoulders of our individual officers and our administrators and across the board. So keeping that in mind, and it's interesting, I was driving in this morning and I was thinking about challenges and priorities for our budget, and all these things are actually related. What I'm going to talk about this morning is actually the challenges and priorities are directly reflected in some way in our budget. With that being said, the challenges of being a police officer is directly related to our issues with recruitment and retention. This is a nationwide issue for policing at this point in time. Right now, as we sit here, we're down 4 officers on the line, which is uniform officers that would be out there on patrol. We have 2 officers out on long-term injured. One is approaching 2 years, and another is approaching a year. So that's a total of 6 openings on the line that we are having to fill with overtime, the majority of the time. So that's directly reflected in our budget. That overtime increase, we intend to be in a similar situation throughout FY '24. Unfortunately, we have 1 recruit in the academy right now. You met her, Amber Grass. She's doing fine. She's going to be graduating in July, and then she's going to go into a 12 to 13-week field training program. So that's the majority of the summer. So we're not anticipating getting any additional staff on board until the end of the summer. That, as Peter alluded to, excellent question. What directly impacts your schedule? Making a difference, plugging a person into a position on the schedule to save us overtime. So that's our number 1 challenge. That's where we're at for recruitment and retention. The good news is we've actually made some great hires. We've attracted some full-time officers from other departments, Provincetown being one, Hopkinton being the other. We've actually hired some candidates who are already coming in academy trained, which saves the town money. So there are some positives as we move into this next recruitment cycle. But looking back when I started as chief, we had a list of candidates that was probably 60 to 70. We would give an exam, 60 to 70 people would participate. We are using an online application process now for the police department applicants. It just closed at the end of February. We have 18 applicants. And actually, comparatively speaking to towns around us, that's good. So that's the situation with recruitment and retention. On to priorities for our incoming budget year. Obviously, the first one is going to be to continue to provide the level of services that we have attempted to provide all along. So that is reflected in our budget. Number 2 is we're looking at this year more of an inward look. Beyond providing the same level of service, we actually there is a more of an awareness of providing a more robust officer wellness approach, especially considering what our officers are out there facing. So we're really focused on an increase in an officer wellness program. That's directly reflected in our budget, and also an increase in training, frequency and amount of training. I think we owe it to our officers, we all owe it to our officers to make sure that they're healthy and that they're properly trained. And those are the priorities that are reflected in our budget. We're not asking for any additional personnel. We're looking to, you know, continue to try and move through our recruiting process, keep our officers safe and healthy, and well-trained.
Thank you, Chief. Peter?
Chief, I just want to know if you have in the budget for the deputy to go to Excel course. He and I took an Excel course together. I know. It was a couple of years ago, but we both laughed on the way out. We know that. So anyhow, so you know, you are right. It's hard to be a police officer in this day and age, and I encourage everybody who runs into them, wherever, just even if you don't know them, just say, hey, thank you for your service. I mean, it's so important to get that positive feedback. So you didn't talk about any statistics like, this crime is going up or that crime's going up in our town. Where does Howard sit, kind of like, level of criminality, or however you wanted to, you guys do it by numbers and statistics, but where are we?
I can take that one, Kevin. It's not related to math. I would
Just
say
in general, I don't
running
need-
the numbers for our last annual report, we're pretty much staying the same. I would say, across the board, the greatest increase we see as a police department is dealing with mental health issues. Those have skyrocketed, and we are attempting to manage that by providing additional, it's called CCIT training to our officers, Community Crisis Intervention Training, which is actually provided free through NAMI, National Alliance of Mental Illness. So there's one coming up in the spring. So that is probably the greatest increase we have seen. That and substance abuse, probably, related to what's gone on with COVID.
So in the mental health part of it, is there any way that a non-police officer professional, I don't even know what that is, could help you out? I mean, if you can't get police officers, is there a way to bring in someone who's a mental health professional to
Absolutely.
the
And we
team?
partnered with Bay Cove, which has provided us with a mental health clinician. We're researching, and we had actually talked with Katie O'Neill about this too. It kind of dovetails with the substance abuse and the opioid funds that we were looking at to get a clinician available to our departments to actually help us in that area. And there are some grants that are available that will fund those clinicians. None of that is in our budget at this point in time.
Okay, and when you talk about having a little bit of a lot of difficulty recruiting or getting a recruitment, a pool of individuals, is it all about what's going on in the country about policing, or is it more things like, hey, I can't afford to live in the town of Harwich, or, I mean?
It's like everything, it's a combination of both, or a combination of all. I think it's generational, for one. I think it's also related to the cost of housing, and I think it's related to what's going on with policing across the nation right now. People's impression of what police do, and so I think it's a combination of all of those things.
Okay. Questions from my board at the table?
I just have a couple of kids.
Michelle, you recognize.
Oh, yeah,
Thank you.
sorry.
Yes, it's okay.
Do you guys have cameras, body cameras yet?
We do
or-
not.
Is there
I was hoping to get that into the Capitol, but we ran across some negotiation issues, and we will be continuing to explore that for the following year.
I just didn't know if the state gave any kind of grant money or something like that. I know
The
that-
state and feds do provide a degree of grant money. Unfortunately, it just purchases the equipment, and the biggest pain related to body cameras is managing the data. It's actually probably about a half of a position that we would have to ask for to manage the data. Because we are so lean right now, we already gave up a half of a clerical
Yeah.
position years
Yeah.
ago.
And the other question I had is just a general question. I know some communities have, volunteer police, people who volunteer to assist the police. Have we ever looked at anything like that in terms of getting community volunteer police officers or?
Absolutely. I'm
Yeah.
a staunch supporter of volunteers. Usually the feeder for our volunteer system is through our Citizens Academy or through our CERT program. The deputy
Yeah.
chief's been directly involved in both of those, so we do utilize CERT. They're usually utilized at the town meetings,
Yep,
right?
and
at,
emergency events.
And the vaccination sites that we had during
Yeah.
COVID. But there's a limit to what volunteers can do.
Yeah, of
because of
course.
training, because of reliability.
Got it, thanks.
Okay, Mark?
So on the revenue, there's, and this is for Mr. Powers, there's a big difference between the 2024 request and the admin and selectmen categories. Is there, that's page 4.
it's a munis report, so I'm gonna phone a friend, I'm gonna look down the end of the table, see if the finance director can help me with that one, and you said it was
The request is
page 4?
about 54 grand, and the town admin and selectmen say 63 grand. And
What?
we can come back to this.
Yeah, well, while you're checking that out, let me go to Bob if he's got a question on there. Dan, you have a question?
Yeah, when you were talking about recruitment, that triggers something in my head. I've heard a lot of advertisements on the radio for corrections officers. I don't know if you
He's a Facebook star. You know, the whole
Yeah, I'll
department
be
is.
signing autographs at the end of the meeting. We did a little recruitment video, one of our officers spearheaded. This is our first foray into social media type of thing, but we are trying to think outside the box.
Yeah.
And we have a very good recruitment and screening committee. They are very committed. They have gone up to colleges, done presentations, and that's the reason why we've actually got hires that come in academy trained and sometimes from other departments. So we're trying to work every angle. It's still a challenge.
It's the first time that I heard, I'm not sure if it's the county or the state, advertise on the radio that they're recruiting corrections.
Yeah, it's a reflection of what's going on throughout public safety.
Oh, I'm sure,
Yep.
yeah.
Well, we also have a new sheriff.
Yes, yes.
Okay, do we have an answer to Mark, to Mark's question?
Anne Marie?
The increase was because we were bringing the receipts up to the 15 million mark.
Did you hear that?
Okay, well,
Local receipts?
okay. Thanks.
You all right? Okay, we'll go out to TV Land. Dana?
I'd say, right off the top, this is a very good budget. I haven't seen any problems with it at all. I also want to commend, a lot of departments that closed out their FY '22 budget with turnbacks, and this was one of the departments that did very well there. I know you're all in 2023 now, but keep up the good work. Thank you.
Okay, Karen?
Yeah, I just had one question for clarification. You mentioned that, we're always doing active recruiting but we don't need any new personnel. Do we have like other approved funded positions that have been approved in previous years that we're trying to fill? Is that why?
I didn't say we don't need any personnel. I said we weren't asking for them.
Right, so if,
That's gonna come.
either
later.
way, if you don't ask them, you don't get the budget, right? So if you had somebody in the recruiting process that stood out, what would you do at that point if you don't have approved funded positions?
No, we do have funded positions. We currently have 3, and we're anticipating 2
Okay.
more in FY '24. So if a full-time trained police officer walked through our door tomorrow and said, I want a job here, would start the process. We have 3 openings
Okay,
right
so you
now.
have 3 that,
Yes.
awesome. Okay,
Basically, the way
that's all
to
I
think
got.
about it is
Thanks.
they're authorized and funded for it, but nobody's showing up at the door. I mean, that's sort of the way to look at it.
Right, well, we've hit some bumps in the road, like when we had 4 recruits lined up, and we thought we would be sending 4 to the academy. 1 went to the state police, 2 backed out of the process.
Yep.
So we sent 1.
Okay, Karen, is
That's
that it?
helpful, thank you.
Okay, Mark?
Yeah, Chief, how are you? Last year, there seemed to be an unrealistically low amount of reimbursement to the town from Cape Cod Tech of approximately $25,000. Can you check on that this year, that reflects, the cost of the officer less the, number of Howard students, if that's possible?
Yeah. What,
So-
$20,000?
Yeah, so the tech reimburses the town $20,000. That's been historic. That hasn't moved. I don't know, that was before our time as far as how that was set up. But that certainly doesn't cover that officer's salary, no.
Yeah, I would definitely pursue that. That is not fair to the town. Another case of we're paying more than our fair share. Second question is it correct that the high school and the elementary school share a school resource officer?
Yes. Tommy
Anyway, and
his
go ahead,
primary
I'm sorry.
role is at the high school, and when he's needed, he will roll out to the elementary school.
If at all possible, I think it would be a great thing, just because of the times. If we can get a full-time officer in both schools. That's just a statement. I know you're hitting difficulties on recruiting, but just the way the world is right now, both in the high school level and the elementary school level. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. We're good, thanks.
Larry?
Well, thank you very much. I'm hoping, I certainly agree with the wellness with all the things going on, and I'm always in favor of training. I also, I appreciate having a lean budget. I'm hoping, though, that when we move forward on this, you take that as a signal of our support for your department, all you're doing.
Thank you.
And we'll go ahead and hopefully we'll fill those positions.
Yeah, we're working on it.
Julie?
Again, thank you for all the info. It's clear and concise. I was actually okay also with you leaving the vehicles in your budget, but if the move is to put them on the capital plan, as long as you guys are okay with that. And the other thing is, I think it's great that, you're focusing on officer wellness and also the mental health training, because I can imagine that the environment is difficult enough, but dealing with mental illness, while you're also trying to, police is not an easy path. So whatever you can do to help the officers in that kind of training is, I think, very important. So thank you.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rapid fire. First of all, just want it out there that Chief and I have had this conversation over the last couple of years. This, not only this board and the government in general, but the citizenry of Harwich is extremely supportful of the police efforts. It's not a contentious environment, and it's something that even your recruits should know, that we're very supportful of that. You do have the tech. I'm somewhat of a fossil here because I was part of the group that negotiated into the budget getting reimbursed. That having been said, it was based on numbers for that period of time. The argument was always that I don't want to hear what community the kids are sourced from. They're here during the course of the day. They become your problem because of where they are. So that really is something that Bob Sanborn has to actually consider in the future, because a lot of stuff has happened in the last 20 years, and that's an unrealistically low number. The recruitment, that also gets back to the tech. I really strongly, and I continue to strongly recommend that you use that as a recruitment tool, because they are not just where they were 20 years ago. I mean, there's tracks there for going to college, so criminology is not out of the question, but it's really a good resource, because those are people who are actually practically speaking about what am I going to do for a real job, as opposed to let me go take more sociology courses or whatever. So it's an important recruitment area. Now, Peter's brought this up before about how you can sell things. One thing that nobody has discussed right now is a success. Instead of talking about what the leverage is for higher crime stats, we asked you as a board to aggressively pursue enforcement for liquor licenses. That actually took a lot of personnel, FTE, to accomplish. Now, the success of that is that instead of it being the Wild West that it was a couple of years ago, that it's calmed down significantly. The citizenry is, I get people all the time saying, wow, it was a lot better last summer than it was a couple of summers ago. That's where I would hang my hat, because you guys only have a number of limited resources at any given shift, how many people you're deploying. That was a big ask. For as many new places that we have that are contributing to the economy of Harwich, it could have been a detriment too, if it had continued cascading downward as an unruly mob, basically. So you guys have had a success, but it didn't come at expense. And I would make sure that you bring that point up.
Thank you.
So I don't want to lose the question from Mark or Don on Cape Cod Tech and whether or not they're paying their fair share.
Is the allocation of the Cape Cod Tech SRO 100%?
As far as his duties? Oh, you mean what we budget for?
Yeah.
I think so,
But
because
we
the
can come back to
20%
that.
goes back to the general fund,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm. And then, does that 20K show up on the first Paul, sorry, there's a line item on here for Paul admin under revenue, is that where that winds up? Yes?
Into the general fund, yes.
Yep.
So if we can at least start that conversation again. Great budget, hard to pick apart a great budget. I think you guys came in very responsibly. This trend of police officers and trying to find them is not getting any better. So what's the answer to that? How are we working on, other than strong recruitment and social media, but looking forward? I can't remember a time that we didn't have 1 or 2 police officers and sometimes up to 4 or 5 that were out injured.
Right.
I can't remember a time that we didn't have open positions. So, should we be aggressively trying to bring in more? Are we doing anything different than anyone else? And I know, Joe mentioned stealing the building commissioner from another community tonight.
Reallocating.
Yeah, reallocating. So, how do we fix this? Because it's not gonna get any better. It's gonna get worse, and you're significantly understaffed.
Yeah, and we're hoping to be able to get 3 out of these 18. And that's the thing, like, we really can't be forward-looking as far as, I have some plans, but they would be based on a fully staffed department, you know what I mean, after that, moving forward. So we have to get up to fully staffed. With that being said, one of my memos to the town administrator included that I think, based on past history over, the past 7.5 years I've been chief, we have to plan on having probably at least two officers down all the time.
Chief, you've never been fully staffed in your time here.
No,
It's
and,
been a battle.
and Michael, thank you for bringing that up. I've reviewed our last 5 or 6 years of these meetings over the past week, and we were at 4 or 5 every year.
Yeah.
4 or 5. And now it is worse, and what we have done is we've had to shift our philosophy of recruitment. We've never had to do recruitment, per se. We had them knocking on our doors. Now we're recruiters. I have a sergeant who's pretty much working her shift as a supervisor, but is a full-time recruiter along with us. And we have the internship at Monomoy High School. We can do more at the tech school. We just started an internship with 4Cs, which we've never had to do before. And we have a young lady now from 4Cs. We're going to job fairs at colleges. We're traveling and going all these places. So we're doing the same thing as changing our philosophy, but you're right, it's not going to improve.
No. And I think to Larry's point earlier on the fire department, I'd rather have more bodies than more overtime. And that's a conversation that this board should have, but what does fully staffed mean? 35?
Yeah,
35.
including me.
Yeah, I would rather have the conversation now about having more bodies, so, as you said, you can always count on 1 or 2 being out.
Yep.
And 2 years is a long time to be down a whole body on a police.
And when we had those 1 or 2 in good years, those are absorbable. Those, with the rest of the bodies, we can work with that. 4 or 5,
8.
it's
I think
not.
we went into last summer down 8.
So is any of it a compensation issue?
Thank you, Peter.
I
That
mean,
was next.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
if you ratchet up the numbers enough, at some point you'll attract some folks, I would think, or is it policing in general? I mean,
I think, again, I think it's a combination. I think that, to the credit of all the officers at Harwich PD, we enjoy a good reputation, and that's reflected in the fact that we've attracted full-time officers from other departments. So I think, obviously, any kind of incentive that we can provide is going to help. But if it's known as a bad place to work, we're not going to be able to attract those people. So
And we're not,
I'm
but
proud
I
of
guess
that fact.
to Peter's point, where do we fall, and we don't need to do this today, where do we fall on pay scale for our department versus other towns? I guess that's a great starting point for a conversation with this board.
And that's what these officers, either laterals that want to come here or move here, or even new recruits. There's more out there for jobs that they are looking at comp tables. They're looking at comparisons. They're looking at cost of living in town. And they're in the driver's seat. They can choose where to go. And that's driving this.
It is, it's an important topic.
quite frankly, I mean, just thinking outside of the box, and it's just like a nutsy thing, right? But if we had to get to a situation where we said, if you come to Harwich as a police officer and you're telling us housing is an issue, blah, 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 I'm making this up. You stay with us for 5 years, here's $100,000, go buy a house. Or go buy the house now with the $100,000. If you don't serve your 5 years, you gotta give it back to us somehow, some way. But I mean,
Peter said it, I didn't.
Put that in writing and just slide it over.
I will, make a video, I'll put it on Facebook. I mean, it's
People
just.
marking tape right now, it was 11:22 a.m.
But look, it's no secret, we have an aging population here, and they need services, and public safety, you know, you guys in the fire department is paramount. I mean, and if we're having trouble recruiting people, we have to understand why. And then we have to start looking at it and say, well, wait a minute, what's some remedies to that? We can't solve the national, you know, identity thing, if you, or perception, if you will, about a policing career, but it may just come down to money.
Chief, go ahead.
I just wanted to make sure we didn't leave without, there's not gonna be any discussion about capital. The cruises are going on capital, is that correct?
We can have that discussion. Let me, Julie, you had a question?
So I just wanted to point out that a lot of this recruitment talk, I'm also thinking that that is something that could fall to assist, not just you guys, but all departments. And recruiting is the personnel person we're talking about having, hiring. So, you know, you're spending a lot of time on it, is my point. And so if there's another resource that could help you with that, it frees up more time for you. And so I think that's another role we should think about with the personnel hire.
Hey, Dan, you had a question?
It's just a comment, that radio advertisement that I mentioned included the starting salary. They actually quoted the starting salary of, I think it was $63,000, which kind of perked my ear up. If I were in the job market, I mean.
Yeah, and we use, we switched over to policeapp.com. You go on that, you type in Harwich, you'll see our whole job advertisement that we wrote up.
Okay.
It's very, going back to Don's statements, very attractive, and we actually mentioned Harwich and the thriving district down there. We mentioned the great stuff, which is great. It's a great community to work in. So I encourage anybody to look at that, and everything's listed, salary, everything's listed.
You need to put what a great finance committee we have.
Absolutely.
And if we're
Julie.
successful at town meeting this year with getting the early childhood stipend, that might be something you throw in there too, because that's money free that they're not paying on childcare. So.
And I guess that's my point on the lower staff, into the finance committee. If we put on 2 patrolmen this year onto a town meeting, it's 2 years before we're gonna see a bill on
We used to
that.
say 1 year, now it's 2 years.
It's 2 years, so. And like I said, the problem's not gonna get better. It's gonna get worse every year for you. Any finance committee, you wanna talk about capital, while we have them and we're ahead of schedule, or?
You can, we're having a public hearing on the plan next week, on the 9th. If we don't get to it here, you're welcome to come and see us at that point in time, because then we'll make our recommendations back to the board. But I hear 4 cruises, is that what I hear?
3 cruisers.
3, okay.
And there are other items on there too, of a lesser degree, you know, rifle plates, taser, and the capital committee supported moving up the improvements to the Emergency Operations Center, which is an IT upgrade. I think that's about it.
Yes.
So, nothing huge, but I just wanted to make sure they didn't fall through the cracks.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Dan?
Yeah, I'll just say on the cruises, I know Peter and I were on the Board of Selectmen when we first put them in the budget years ago. And that was a very painful exercise, but we knew they were an operational use that came up every year. And it was sad to see them go out of the budget, but if it's gonna be as part of the capital plan, we have to just make sure that it never goes out to an override like it did once before, and they didn't get passed. It's a yearly need, and trying to reflect it in the operating budget is the best place for it. But if we're gonna do it a different way, we have to make sure that everybody's committed to supporting it.
Thank you, Dana. Don, anything further?
Yeah, I've said this before, just, Dana, to make it clear, where it resides and the funding source are 2 independent variables. I would say that when the budget cycle begins, it should be a set aside in the general funds regardless of which place it is, because you know you're gonna need these things. They shouldn't be subject to an override. My point with the capital plan was, it's still over $50,000 that you're talking about expending, so you really should show people that that's what's going on, but it could be be tethered to the general funds. It doesn't have to be an override or some extraordinary funding mechanism.
I don't want to rehash this conversation. We can all do it at our own meetings, but I do agree with Don, and I believe it's a capital item. It should be on the capital plan. But anything further, Julie? Larry?
No, I agree, we just need to fund it at this point.
I'm set. Thank you.
Stay safe out there.
Thanks, guys.
What a nice
Forgot
day.
to mention the polar plunge and making everybody.
March 18th, Polar Plunge, Red River Beach.
It's gonna be really
Oh, yeah?
cold that weekend, I
Town
hear.
administrator's gonna be
Kevin,
there.
Kevin, I'll try to come by and
towels.
watch.
In a Speedo?
I'll come by and
Holding
watch
towels
you.
in a Speedo.
Why is the polar plunge like in spring?
I chose that date.
I just want that out there.
So, Mr. Chairman, next up, we have our
That's why you're not gonna see me
Conservation
there, it's too
Director
warm.
presenting the Conservation Department budget. You'll find in the general ledger expense on page 6, and general ledger revenue, page 3. There are enhancement of services, and those are reflected in the operating budget documentation you have, and you see that in the column reflecting Board of Selectmen. With that, I will, through you, Mr. Chairman, turn it over to our Conservation, I like to say Director, but Administrator, I think is the actual title.
Technically administrator.
Good morning, Amy.
Good morning, everybody. How are you?
Good.
Good morning.
Thanks for having me here today. Like a lot of my counterparts, the request here is for add to staff. I will state that a couple of years ago, we actually did have 2.5 positions. Which is what we're looking to do. We're looking to move it around a little bit to better suit the needs of our department. I know I was told that there might be some questions about staffing levels historically, and I'm prepared to answer those for you. But first, I'll kind of go through my request, which is to add a part-time, year-round administrative assistant. I have it as administrative assistant, not executive assistant at this time. Per the HEA new agreement, that cost to be a little bit different than what you saw on my initial request when we used the different older numbers. So the request is $27,788.92, just a little bit over the 23-something that I had originally put.
Amy, can you restate one more time, please?
I have it calculated as $24,788.92 for FY '24, and that's adding that 2% that HEA was just
With
agreed.
benefits.
No benefits. That being said, hearing the conversation that you've had prior, more than happy to share a position with somebody else if that is the pleasure of the town. Probably be able to attract more applicants for a full-time position anyways. Myself and the assistant conservation agent, we are technical people. We also are good at doing the administrative tasks, but it really takes away from the field work we need to do. We do all the permit processing and issuance, the emails, the phone calls, people coming in, minutes we do. And when I say we for minutes, it's Melissa who does the minutes. Payroll, agendas, and the like. In addition to being responsible for all the wetlands and their buffer zones in the town and staffing a board of conservation commissioners, we also take care of over 1,000 acres of conservation land, many of which with trail systems. And it's just an incredible amount of work for 2 people. We try to save the town as much money as we possibly can. We use a lot of DPW staff, we use AmeriCorps members. Instead of hiring Audubon to do shorebird monitoring, we hire our own, and that saved the town probably about $10,000 a year by doing that. One of the things we really pride ourselves in is our customer service. And it's something I feel like we are not providing as well as we could at this point. And it's extremely stressful to have all this work on 2 people. But we are predominantly, half-time, we're out in the field. And we can't be here to answer the phones or for the walk-ins. We've reduced the walk-ins because we are also started electronic permitting. But, you know, people come and knock on our door, and we have a note up there that says, please leave us a message, we'll get back to you, and we do that day. But we really need a person. We need somebody to be that face who can answer the basic questions, who can do the administrative tasks. So that is my main request of you folks. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Peter.
So when you say part-time, is that someone 20 hours a week?
I had it at 19 hours.
19.
Yep.
What's the magic threshold to get to benefits? Is it 19?
Over 19.
Over 19.
To get benefits, yep.
Okay, so it'd be 19. So you're in the field a lot, so your office is vacant, basically, right? So if someone comes up and has an issue, there's no one there, right?
No, there is a nice board that says,
Yeah,
please
okay,
leave
but-
us a message. Yes, there's no
Yeah.
person there.
Yeah.
Sometimes they ask, you know, we're right next to the elevator here, and the planning department door's there. They have a full-time person sitting there. It leaks over to them, you know, and they talk to the people and have to tell them, we'll be back, you know, and take a
So are you thinking, if you got this part-time person deploying it so that 5 days a week that person is there, like in the morning, set hours? Or are you thinking about 3 days a week and they're there, you know,
We're
so much?
flexible at this point with the candidate.
Yeah. But the intent is to provide a better customer service. That's what your intent is here,
That
right?
is what our intent is.
Yeah.
For us to be out in the field doing a full day of field work, I have to plan that over 2 weeks in advance right now, just to be like, okay, this whole day, we're gonna be out in the field doing something we need to be doing.
And this may be something that the Board of Selectmen gets some calls about once in a while, I'm guessing, or?
We don't get any calls.
You don't get any calls? Yeah, okay, so it could be an aggravation for them. So far, nobody's calling us, so it's
Well,
okay,
that's-
so.
People don't seem to mind too much with, you know, we get back to them as soon as we possibly can, and the nature of our job is, can you really expect us to be in there 24/7 with what we do? But still,
Well, I think people expect us to provide a reasonable level of service and response.
Yeah.
No matter what department they're going to, so I
Right.
think that's what we're sort of getting at here. So I'll go on until my board at the table here. Anybody have any issues, questions? No, they're all shaking. All right, we're gonna go to TV land. Dana?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, Karen?
All good, thank you.
Mark Kelleher? Mark, you out there? And we lost him. Okay. We'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chairman.
All set here.
All right, thank you.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wouldn't step on the headline here about administration and customer service, because I think it's a misallocation of resources to have a higher level staff engaging in lower level activities. And particularly because unlike planning or the ZBA, you guys actually have to follow through on your orders of condition and seek compliance. Unless you're figuring that everybody that comes into you is just a wonderful individual and they really want to help the environment. What concerns me is that, and I've said this before, is that you have no real mechanism to do something to show people. It becomes a joke, actually, to people who might be on the fence about, well, can I get away with this or not get away with this? If the reality is it's all from the goodwill of the person on the other side, whether they actually want to do everything that it takes to comply with an order. So I'm concerned that that gets out of hand, especially with some of the clientele that you deal with, which, you know, we got lawyers, we'll just hire them and we can come in, you can say whatever you want, and we get some sort of approval, and then we go and do whatever we do. You don't have the wherewithal to follow up on all of that. You just don't. And if you're taking some of your valuable compliance time and then getting back to people who had left you a message, then that makes it even worse, not better.
Julie?
So obviously, I watch a lot of your meetings, or I'm at them, so I understand that also the volume, and a lot of the volume that's happening is reoccurring because they're coming back for multiple hearings. In addition to what Don said about compliance and the inability, for example, you know, the public gets upset that we're not imposing fines on certain individuals, and yet when you understand the time it would take of Amy's time to have to be out there on a daily basis reporting, There's just no way that that can happen under the current circumstances, even with another person.
We do the best we absolutely can. We do a lot of enforcement. It's really ramped up in the past 2 years or so. But we have a couple right now, of very egregious violations, and they require daily monitoring and things like that. And it's extremely hard to do.
Right. And so the only other comment I would make is you said you were amenable maybe to doing one full-time person that was split, which I like that idea, because this other person we're talking about part-time would be assisting with other regulatory boards, which Amy's board is. So putting one person in there, being able to pay benefits, et cetera, I know that bumps it up, but I think consolidating one person to be dealing with those various boards might be helpful. It's also one body to see versus 2 places, so those are my comments.
Larry?
Yes, I agree with the previous comments. I like your idea, and what Julie says, of one full-time for reasons. I'll just pile on the enforcement activity, because we're not a police state, so you're not going around policing the Wetland Protection Act. Most of that comes from people calling in with issues that they need to respond to. You know, that's separate from compliance from your actions. And that takes people in the field, technical people in the field, so very supportive of your request.
Thank you.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For those folks who weren't there, Julie and I went to a meeting where Amy Questle from KP Law was there. Just to get an idea, this is not an event, it's a series of events for compliance. If somebody doesn't do something, it has to be done every single day. They have to go out and write it up as a discrete violation report, charge them back, and the most that they're allowed to do is assess $300. So this is a series of, if they don't want to do it for a year, if you're serious about compliance, and I don't mean the Wetlands Act, I mean, we've agreed to do something, and we've got an order of condition, and now we're just blowing past it. Every day you have to make out a violation report, and the only thing you can get out of it is $300. And if you want to pile that on, it's got to be every single day for whatever amount of time it takes to get them back into compliance.
And we go to court. I'm in court right now with somebody who has refused to pay.
So one person really can tie you up for a long time.
Yep, we going to court this week for somebody.
All set, Don? Very quickly, and I don't even like to ask because it's $3,000 out of a $70 million budget.
I'm
What
prepared for that, too.
What are you doing with your expenses?
Sure. So back in 2020, we had more expenses than we have now, and then with COVID, that got docked. What we are requesting is not to be made whole, but to start coming back to that in a couple of our line items for our expenses, namely the water utility. That is for predominantly the community gardens. Something else I want to chat with you about, and it's related, is fees, not just for application fees, but for fees for community gardens. Right now, we used to be pretty much even with the fees that we would take in for the community gardens with what it would cost us predominantly in water. This year with the drought, we're going to be in excess of what we have. And we are looking into putting in a well, larger expense at the beginning, but going forward smaller. But for this next year, I am requesting, instead of $3,254, the request is for $4,000, which should cover the water utility for this coming year as we kind of decide how we're going to move in the other direction. And then under other property-related services, we used to have $4,000. We've in the past been at $1,000. I'm requesting $2,000. That is for things such as property-related services, meaning what we need to take care of our conservation lands, better signage, fencing, tools, whatever you may need out in the field. We were very fortunate that we did get CPC funds 2 years ago, and we've put money towards that, but that is coming to an end. So we've, like I said, we borrow and use as much as we can from other departments, but there are times where you just need new things.
Amy,
Something-
what what's the number that makes you whole? Now, you said at the beginning that you manage 1,000 acres of conservation land.
Yes,
And you guys do an outstanding job.
trying to do
You have
better, but yes.
$9,000 in expenses.
Yeah,
What actually makes you whole? Because it was never a big number.
no, it's never ever a
And
big
we
number.
did scalp you at a few years ago.
I understand.
What makes you, and you graciously accepted that scalping. So what makes you whole?
4,000.
So what would your
And
total
that's
expense line be?
still, it's 2,000 more than, it would be, instead of $9,032, it would be $11,032.
So, and maybe this isn't the place to do it, but I will be making that request of the board. Just so the finance committee's aware, I'll be making that request as a change to go up.
And just do the calculation for 1,000 acres.
That's right.
It's peanuts
Yeah.
per acre.
Yeah.
I'd like to see your
It's not a
budget get back to what it was.
I appreciate that.
My comments remain the same on staff, and I think that falls on the town administrator. But we're paying people to do the minutes for the Board of Selectmen meetings. We seem to have an awful lot of people, and I'd like to just see how that looks on paper. Go ahead.
Thank you. I really, really can't tell you how much we appreciate, I can speak for Melissa too, how much we appreciate you wanting to make us whole. If that comes, if there is that opportunity, instead of maybe 4,000 being in property-related services, I'd like maybe 3,500 for property-related services and another 500 for dues, subscriptions, and in-state travel, so we can do a better job of educating myself and the commissioners.
Can you just get that in an email to the board
Yes, I
and
can.
the finance committee, please?
Yeah.
And-
Thank you.
And the town administrator.
Of course.
Any follow-up questions from anybody?
Anybody have any questions? Any additional questions?
I just had a question.
Go ahead.
Ed, I think you said CPC, I'm new to this, so do we get state grants and things like that for conservation, or it's kind of?
There's not as many, there used to be actually local grants for a lot of land management things. That is not the case so much anymore. We have applied and received grants in the past, and then again, it comes down to time and money to apply, or time to apply for those
yeah,
grants.
Yeah. Is that would an administrative person be able to help you with maybe applying for grants? Because that's, that's an important source of money
Yeah.
if it's out there.
It probably would be more myself or the assistant agent, and there is a county grant writer who can do research for that. We've worked with them in the past, and that has been successful. It really it's the time for the technical staff need to have additional time to be able to research more of those opportunities, so.
I do want to mention, John Ketchum, the chairman of the Conservation Commission, took the time last night to write a letter of support for your position request, sent it to the Board of Selectmen, so I wanted to mention that John Ketchum sent a nice letter to us supporting your request.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you, John, if you're listening.
Thanks for coming in.
I do have a couple of rakes and holes I'd be,
We're
I have some
gonna-
rakes and holes I'd be happy to donate if you need.
You're cutting into our lunch.
We're going to take the opportunity, because we're ahead of time, and Town Administrator is going to present the Community Center's request.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me get back to that section. Thank you, Amy. So first, I will alert you to, this was scheduled for 12:30 to 12:45. Ms. Carey is, well, I think as we all know with Carolyn, the only thing that would keep her away from a budget discussion is being under the weather, and that's what happened. She sent me a text last night, and I've tried to assure her that I can speak to the community center budget, because there are enhancement of services that I've endorsed that tie into community center and highway department. But I also want to put out there that I'm sure that if the finance committee and/or board of selectmen wish to hear from her in the future, I know she'd readily accept the invitation, and I know you folks would readily make it. So with that, if you look under general ledger expense, page 16, and general ledger revenue, page 6, you can see what we're talking about with the community center. And so, allow me a second to get back to my notes so I can speak cogently to it. As with other departments, what's being asked for here is enhancement of services to impact positively on programming. The long and short of Carolyn's request to me that I found to be very impactful was to get the town of Harwich programming back to where we enjoyed it prior to the onset of COVID. And so to do that for the community center, it's the enhancement of services that you see reflected in those lines there. I'm gonna fully admit, that's a throwaway line. I can't find my notes yet. Give me one quick second. I definitely want to do this justice. So the request and the salaries and wages is an additional $46,425, and that impacts upon community center salary and wages. That is for a program specialist, and again, it's restoring us to where we were prior to COVID. Additionally to that, there is also an ask that relates to the highway department, and it would be for custodial services to account for the resumption of the original hours. So I think what we're talking about here generally is, prior to COVID, we had 87 hours of programming at the community center where the hours were Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., Saturdays 8 to 4 p.m., Sundays noon to 4. These requests for enhancement of services would get us to those hours and to those level of service. So again, it's a program specialist under community center. It is additional custodial support, excuse me, and that would be in the form of overtime under the highway budget. Again, this is an enhancement of service that was endorsed in my budget documents, carried over in the board's documents, and there's a direct correlation between that and additional program fees that can come in, but the more important item for me is nothing says we're making progress coming out of COVID like opening our communities center, and that's why I endorse the requests.
Thank you, Joe. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to bolster what Joe just said, our surrounding communities have already done that largely. So it would be nice to get back to a service level that was pre-COVID, because this isn't an enhancement in the truest sense of the word. It's a reversion back to the way things were. My question, I got a question that's out of the clear blue sky, though. Are we sure that the electric is accounted for adequately? I mean, where are we getting our electricity from in that building? Is it off the grid, or is it from solar, or?
There's no solar that correlates directly to that building. It would be incorporated into the overall cost, indirect costs, but it's not solar.
That's why I asked that, especially since I'm treasurer of a couple of organizations. If it's only going up 10% based on what the rate increases were, that's amazing.
Conservation.
It must be, because
Well, no, if you're
the rates went up a lot more than 10.
if you're not going full hours, you have less lights on, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it could be a factor that is offsetting the increase in cost.
That brings up the other question. Indeed, was the EOS part of that? Because it's a moving part. You have the building open more, you're going to be using more electricity. Is that part of what the enhancement of services would get you to?
I don't believe that was captured in these items. For me, it's not a deal breaker. We capture that through CVAC, and You know, I think we've managed our buildings very well, where Sean Libby can speak to, we're still a green community. So we have smart lighting systems throughout the building, but it's not something that I could intelligently speak to this morning.
I just thought I'd mention that there's a relationship.
As an example, the highway department electric went up 22%.
I don't know that that was specifically for this ask, excuse me.
Right, but it's a comparable.
Worthwhile to ask.
Yeah, it seems like we can get an answer to that.
Sure.
Julie?
Well, similarly, I was looking at the gas cost, it's up 45%. So,
About what my house went up to.
I know, no, I know, it's, it's
lot.
awful.
You know, I
But
just-
other than that, I don't have any issue with that.
I would just say on the utilities, obviously, costs are going up, but I think that, you know, a good department manager, which we had a lot of them, all of them, will look at what they've done the last year actual and say, okay, now I recognize, all right, we saved, I'm making this up, 10% on kilowatt hours or usage, so therefore, you know, I'm putting in this budget request. The last thing they wanna do is fall short on gas, electric, whatever, so.
No, and I think it's important to return to the pre-COVID days, so I think, you know, it's a reasonable request.
If there's a blackout, the electric costs will go down and the gas prices will go up.
Larry?
Nice to know.
Thank you, Michael. No, I've supported before, and I support this, so
Thank you,
no
Larry.
further comments.
Peter?
Okay, so just to be clear, Joe, you mentioned, this is a new position, right? Program specialist?
Well, I guess the way I would say it is it's a return position. Program specialist appears in the HEA contract. We've had the position funded before, it's restoring the position.
Okay, so it's not a new position.
Correct.
It's a restoration of a position.
Correct.
Okay, so we're not adding a body, we're just funding a body.
Correct, that we did not fund for the last few years.
Yeah, okay, okay, no, I get that, that's okay, good, all right, good news for me. All right, questions from my board? Bob?
Just, I guess, additional clarification on what Peter just asked. So that person hasn't been employed in the last few years? This
The role has
specialist?
not been filled, correct.
The role has not been filled? Okay. And it has not been budgeted either?
Correct, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Dana?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, Karen?
Are they both full-time positions or part-time?
There's only one that we're talking about, programs, as I understand it, program specialist is the community center. The other aspect that Joe was talking about was increasing custodial support, which is in the highway budget.
Correct.
The way I understand it. We'll get to that when we talk about the highway budget, I guess.
Oh, okay,
All right?
okay.
Mark?
So is
Oh.
no, hold on, is the program specialist is then full-time? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
And I personally would like to see a justification that's different than pre-COVID levels, more in mind of saying, maybe it's sufficient at what it is. I'm not saying it is, but is there, what's impacted by not having this?
I guess.
You know, and I don't need to know that now when we go through headcount later or at some other point for all positions, like what are we giving up by not adding these positions? Because there's so many at some point, I'm not sure we'll be able to fund them all, but we'll see.
Well, first I will tell you that what I recommended and what went to the board is different than what the board recommended. And it may be different what the finance committee recommends. The reason why this is an original enhancement of service is because whether we've realized it as a town or not, we have reduced a program. And we did not have a substantive community discussion on reducing those programs. Rather, the reduction of programming was a result of COVID. So the ask is for us to be able to offer to the community that what we offered prior to March 13th of 2020.
So Joe, is it fair to say, although we call this program specialist, which would be the person you're putting in place here, but it's not one program, it kind of goes across a myriad of programs at the community center? In other words, maybe additional hours for this program or that program?
Correct, yeah. What Carolyn and I talked about is she'd be able to rely upon a program specialist who's dedicated, not necessarily by act, but by the additional hours. So if we're going from a community center that was closed on Sundays, what program can we offer through the community center from noon to 4? on Sundays, et cetera, et cetera.
Right, okay. And would there be any increased revenue associated with any of these programs, maybe? I don't know.
That is absolutely the anticipation, the articulation of which I would defer to Callan.
No,
But
that's,
I bought it, and I think it's legit.
okay. You good, Karen?
Yeah, and I guess in any business I've been in, there's always some sort of leaning out at times, and it doesn't necessarily impact the business. It might even make it more efficient. So I'm not talking about this position specifically, but in some cases, maybe going to pre-COVID levels isn't really buying you anything. And that's the stuff that I think I'd want to see anyway. Like, what is the real advantage, not just to this one, but to all the different positions by bringing them in now? And we don't have to drain it here. This is something I would always want to know, and even if I bring those in now.
All right.
Manager.
All right, your point's taken. Mark?
Mr. Chair, if I could?
Yep, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
I wouldn't want to miss the opportunity, because now we're getting into philosophy. This isn't a business. We try to run
No.
it as much as we can like a business, but this is community programming. This is the center of our town. This is the lifeblood of what we offer to the community. If there's one place that the town used to be able to go 7 days a week, it was our community center. And so there's no profit loss that we can do, there's no R&D that can go into that. This, to me, is a philosophical discussion of what programming do we want to offer the town. It permeates all of the discussions that I ask my department heads. And if we're going to remain there, then the community should be aware that an insidious global pandemic changed the way we offer programming to our community. That may stick, but let's make it a conscious act and not a reflection on what COVID did.
Understand.
Can I just ask that question?
Well, let me get to Mark. Mark Keller, do you have a comment on the community center?
No, I support the position.
Okay. Michelle?
Oh, I was just wondering how that bumps up against the cultural center, and is there any overlap there in terms of programming, or it's purely focused on rec?
So we're a minute from lunch, and we're going to start out with Cultural Affairs Director. I'm going to restrain myself from not calling it 204 Sisson, but it's distinct programming.
Okay.
You know, we're talking about general community programming at the community center, where we'll be talking about cultural programming at 204.
Thank you.
Got it. All right, look at that. Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
So Joe, I asked the question, and I haven't seen the numbers yet, but I had asked the question of pre-pandemic versus now. When did this actually drop off the budget? You said it wasn't budgeted for, and that also falls into we keep talking about cleaning contracts. Prior to COVID, we didn't have any cleaning contracts, but did we have another custodian for the community center that we're refilling that position and we hadn't filled it before? And I don't need that information now, but that question, I already sent you an email, so I'd like to see where it dropped off, at what level it's picking up. I support the position, but the cleaning one, to me, strikes me because we ramped up our custodians, not decrease them. And now, on this level, we're being asked to bring one back, if we're actually bringing them back. And Selectman Anderson brought up increasing the contract that we now have with the private service to keep the public restrooms open around town. Again, I don't need that now, but Finance Committee should get the answers to my question as well as the rest of the board.
If I do have it, can I respond?
Yes.
Because I finally found my notes. So with regard to the program specialists, it's returning to pre-programming hours. The salary level is $44,499. That may go up slightly based on the contract you heard that was settled. And so that program specialist, I believe, dropped off the rolls in fiscal years 21 and 22. It would have been in our budget for fiscal year 20 that we were going into. Ironically, the last time we met in this room to do budgets. And then very quickly, I've captured the highway statement, because I don't want to have us leave the room yet without me making sure I give you the accurate numbers. So the custodial ask for highway is for an additional custodian and overtime to cover program hours at the community center. You'll also hear later on when we have Lincoln that that was in lieu of an enhancement of services that the Public Works Department and the cemetery were looking for. And so in highway, you'll see an additional $55,857 on the salary and wages, and that's related to custodian and overtime. And there's an additional expense line of $1,500, and those are expenses related to custodial use. And the concept being, the program specialist is gonna resume the process of programming. The custodian is going to be the staff member guaranteed on site for evenings and weekend hours, breaking down rooms, setting up rooms, et cetera. It's separate and distinct from cleaning that we were doing under COVID for sanitation and cleansing purposes, and separate and distinct from the comfort stations that we do.
So this is technically a new position.
The, well, I don't know what we're using new for. The custodian is an add to resources. I can't speak to the number of custodians we had prior. I believe it's there, but I don't want to speak to that till this afternoon. But the program specialist is a resumption.
Just for clarity, if I can put it in writing back from my email and share with the finance committee. It really asks for a look back, because this feels like an add to staff to me. And it's been sold, or at least explained in the past as bringing back to pre-pandemic levels. So if we had it for, it's not new.
Understood.
Thank you. Anything further, Peter?
No, good, thank
You all
you.
set?
Thank you.
Board?
All set.
Lunch break.
Good.
We'll
So we
suspend
will
our meeting
resume
for.
at 12:30, and we'll start off with our Director of Cultural Affairs.